Alrighty, good evening everyone. Thank you very much for being patient. We're a little bit late today. It is 1906, Monday night, the 1st of April, and boy, if I've been fooled by a couple of April Fool's jokes today, that was kind of annoying. Welcome everyone to the Town of Hanover Selectboard meeting in downtown Hanover. And we have I'm not sure how long this agenda is going to go tonight, but I'm ready for it to be not our shortest one ever. So, to start off the agenda, we have a couple of, I'm going to do the agenda review first, so move that up a little bit. We have 3 public hearings which we're going to talk about, and then we have public comment, and then we are going to be discussing some items regarding election, and then getting into some issues which we tabled from last meeting. So the meat of the agenda is right up front, so let's get going. We are going to I'd like to open a public hearing to consider the fiscal year 25 budget. So that public hearing is open. Now, Alex, we talked about this at our last meeting, and Alex, you gave us a very lengthy memo regarding where we're standing right now. But just to get a summary of where we are, sometime in the fall, I don't remember the exact date, the select board gave guidance to our town staff to come up with a budget with a 5 to 7% increase, and at the moment we're sitting at a 6.5 something percent increase, and that's involved a lot of that has involved a lot of new programs, and that has involved a lot of new initiatives, and in particular, as everyone knows, the largest element of our budget is staffing, and there's been a large impact of the proposed budget of changes in our staffing compensation package. And the things which we addressed last meeting in order were so much better when I don't forget my paper, and please everyone excuse me, I'm a little bit working to find all these things again. Do you have the paper memo that Alex gave out? You didn't print it either. I just want to use it as a way to frame my statements. So I'm going to spend 2 seconds and open it. Apologies everyone in the audience.
Did you find it?
Yes, I did. So we talked about a couple of things at our last meeing. We talked about there was a couple of requested budget items to be added. The undesignated fund balance. There was some discussion on percent fund, health insurance costs. We have an update, although it's not a happy update, and some additional items which we're going to bring up. So Alex, I'm looking at the memo which you distributed to us, and it looks we're making some changes in how those items are going to be incorporated, and we think we can incorporate them. I don't know if you want to touch on how we think actually the funding for those is decreased. We're confident that what I'm talking about are consulting fees for the Complete Streets program and the software for the CIPC, and we're confident that those initially had added up to $123,000, which is a whole point on our, which is exactly a whole point as ever, or is it on our tax rate change. And in fact, we're confident. Alex, can you update me on where we think we're going to end up with those 2 items?
Yeah, so after that conversation, Ellen and I looked at a couple different options of kind of what to do, and obviously after this we spoke a couple times about it, and so we looked at kind of putting everything into the budget, and as you just mentioned, that would have been an additional 1% on the tax rate increase. not including either of the items, charging them to the undesignated fund balance, or swapping them out for something else. And what we did was a sort of 5-point plan. So number one is in the planning and zoning budget, there's a $50,000 expense for a building height, or part of the expense in that consulting fees account was $50,000 for the building height visualization analysis. We believe that could be done with $30,000 instead of $50,000, with pretty minimal negative impact to the work product. We also, in a similar way, looked at reducing the anticipated expense for the CIPC software from $30,000 to $10,000. I think that $30,000 was a bit overestimated, and that the software can be purchased for $10,000 with something around $5,000 for the software and $5,000 for training and consulting to get it set up. So $5,000 of that is one time, $5,000 is recurring. Because we saved $20,000 from number one, we felt comfortable moving the CIPC, that $10,000 into the budget, especially because that is going to have a recurring expense and it's really important to do. So that is in the budget that's presented and proposed. The CIPC software is in the budget. We also looked at reducing the anticipated cost from the complete street study from $93,000 to $75,000. And again, that's another consulting project where we think we can churn that down a little bit without really losing anything too important. It means staff might have to do one or two things instead of a consultant. And then including that $75,000 in charges to the undesignated fund balance in this year. And so in doing that, although we wanted to reduce the fund balance usage even more, and it would have been had we not had this emergency repair for town hall that we have to do next year, that's $175,000. But still, as proposed, and Ellen and I are happy to discuss any of the other options or any of these sort of items I'm reading out here, but as proposed, the fund balance would end at the end of FY25 at about 14.34%, which is still at the high end of the select board's policy of 10 to 15%. So we looked at a few different ways to do this, and we thought that was the sort of, out of the options, the best one to recommend back to the select board. But and that's the way the budget's structured, but I'm happy to talk about other directions too.
I'm just going to thank you, Alex, for that. And the first thing I meant to do, point of order, is really, since we are in a public hearing with respect to voting on the budget, I should say, I think we need a motion at this point. And then discussion should follow.
I think we might want to do the public hearing portion first.
Okay, fine.
And then close the public hearing.
Sounds great.
Yeah, but I mean, we could do the board discussion.
Okay.
That way. But I think the public hearing.
Public hearing.
Okay.
Or the board discussion after, either way, but I think the public hearing has to be separated out from like the board discussion from making a motion and doing a second.
Right.
We should have the discussion before we make the motion, I believe. Otherwise, it should be a very brief discussion because we'll have already moved.
Fine. Yes, I did. I in the discussion that I had with Alex, independent of this meeting, I did agree that putting that in the undesignated fund balance would be the most reasonable approach for that, for the reasons that were just stated. And it gets us we're calculating, Ellen, 14.34.
Correct.
Which, and I have to say, I've gone through a little bit of a swing in my treatment consideration of the undesignated fund balance over the last week. Being basically a person who always wants to have money stashed under the mattress, was leaning towards keeping the undesignated fund balance at or above 15, but that is really not in keeping with our policy, and this number seems more in tune with that. It does change how much we are trying to get away from it. We had stated earlier that we're trying to reduce by 10% every year, and this is going to, obviously, I don't know if you have that number in front of you, Ellen. I don't think it matters because it's going to have an impact on it regardless. Kari, you might have one. You might have that number for us. So that's a point of discussion. Kari.
Just one clarification. So, Kari Asmus, Hanover Finance Committee Chair. I did notice that this version still has the $77,000 in it for the police radio, so if that's not an error, that is, it does need to stay in undesignated, is that the case? Because if it isn't, then the number is much closer to 15.
Correct. Yeah, it is still in there.
Is that intentional?
What is it? I thought we were doing that out of the capital reserve fund for the police radio, so I know you guys talked about that, it sounded like there was money available.
So there is money available, and that I did not move it out of the.
Right, so I saw that the 8,000 for the fire alarm at the Etna Library was taken out. If the 77 were to be taken out, 77,000, that would put the anticipated fiscal year 25 year-end fund balance at 14.8% as opposed to 14.3, so that's a little bit better for those.
To restate, that's taking out the radios and taking out,
The fire alarm is already out. If we should also take the 77 out and pay for it with the capital reserve fund, which it looks like there is money in there for it, that would help the anticipated fiscal year 25 year-end fund balance or undesignated fund balance that would put it at 14.8.
great, thank
Which is
you.
much closer. I do want to say though that we had sort of a miscalculation of whether or not we were increasing or decreasing usage. I sent out a rather complicated email, but just to put it sort of simply, we were looking at, one hand with an apple and an orange in it, and in the other hand, we only had an apple. What we really needed to do was do an apple-to-apple comparison. And even taking out the 77,000, that increases the reliance on this fund by 16%. So we're not decreasing at all. However, all the things on this list do meet the provisions of the policy, and it puts you within the range of the policy.
It does.
So it doesn't meet the goal, but it meets the policy.
Yeah, thank you, that's really helpful.
Can I ask a question? Elle, is there a reason not to do this? I mean, are you comfortable if we, what's your recommendation?
Not to do what?
I think the
Not to take it
recommendation
out.
is
Using
to,
it as CRF.
yeah, I think the
Right.
recommendation is to take it from the capital reserve fund.
Okay.
And it should have been removed, and it doesn't change the appropriations in the budget, it changes the revenue source for that 77,000. So then it'll come from the police capital reserve fund, which still does leave a balance at the projected balance at the end of 2025 in that CRF that supports the roll forward.
Quick question, Alex, when you mentioned the complete streets going from 93 to 73, you said, but it will rely on more work from the staff.
Mhm.
Have you already told the staff that?
So I'm not worried about that. I mean, this is typical in consulting contract proposals, is that they will we will pay a whole lot of money for things that we can easily do in-house. Sometimes it's copying and scanning things, sometimes it's facilitating a public meeting. So I haven't gone and itemized through that contract recently, but I'm confident that we can do it at that 75,000. Like, that's not gonna overly burden staff.
Our staff.
I appreciate that question, but yeah, all these, usually there's a few areas where we can kind of, in the best case world, it's nice to have someone else do it all, but we can do it.
Without burdening on them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's something that we have done that the board needs to consider in its vote, which is going to come up in the near future. And Kara, yes, while I'm gathering my
So
thoughts.
can, only because this is confusing and I want to make sure I understand it, placemaking. So placemaking is drawing money from here, and over this year and that year. So some of it's ARPA, some of it's ARPA 24, some of it's ARPA 25, some of it's it being raised this year. Can you walk us through the various monies and where they will go toward?
So I mean, I think there's two different ARPA amounts, and then there's our budget account or amount that was in our budget, $30,000. So we don't have every single dollar, like most things in the budget, not every single dollar is anticipated yet, right? We don't know what we're gonna spend it on or what products are being purchased, but it's all for investing things in the core of the downtown. So that could go to a range of things. I mean, one, for example, is our sidewalks are really bad looking right now, and we've had quite a few actually residents trip over them and file incident reports downstairs. We could spend the money in that direction. We could spend the money on furniture for events on Allen Street. We could put picnic tables outside Town Hall. We could purchase lights for the holiday season. It's all stuff sort of like that, if that helps.
But just on the sidewalks, is that not I mean, isn't there a budget for maintaining sidewalks, et cetera?
There is. There's a budget for maintaining sidewalks, about $30,000 a year. The select board decided not to spend any of that money this year, so we are a year behind. So if we were doing a project in the downtown, I would say there are certain sections where it would be more appropriate to spend money like that. But like most budget accounts, there's not every dollar that is appropriated in the budget has like a product that is tied to specifically, versus like many budget accounts have things for professional development or for consulting fees. And so anything that helps people gather or be in the downtown, I would think would be an appropriate use of that money. But so there's a couple different directions that could go in, and I think the idea is that we all agree that we want to invest in the downtown and that we want the downtown to be vibrant. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from folks in the community about that, and it's a big goal in the master plan. And so if there are goals in the master plan, the idea is to fund the work that would allow us to accomplish those, and downtown placemaking is one of those.
So how do those decisions get made though, in terms of how that money is spent? Because the master plan doesn't have an implementation plan yet, an implementation chapter yet. We've identified millions of dollars worth of incredible ideas in that planning process, which it's an amazing document. But I'm just wondering if we've allocated, about, I think it's about, I want to say 80,000 for placemaking between the ARPA 24, ARPA 25, and then the 30,000. Is that, who makes the decision on whether we do sidewalks or furniture, or is that, if it's going to the community to vote on, it's just, we're asking taxpayers to pay and for us to use the ARPA money for that. But is that going to be you? Is it going to be the DPW because the sidewalks are dangerous? So I'm just wondering the process. Or are we going to have a public hearing and solicit input, and then the select board decides?
So I think it would be in line with the way that we spend money on anything else, which could be any of those things. Like, do you see this as some other category of spending?
And I just think that the select board has a responsibility for the streets and sidewalks. As you all know, I'm very interested in making sure our sidewalks are traversable by, even the smallest wheels. I know a lot of people struggle, and I know the Main Street ones, some were not touched since the 80s and some were retouched in the 90s. So the 30,000, I think the estimate for keeping up on South Main is about 150,000 was what we got at the Capital Improvement Program Committee, that if we don't redo it, it would cost about $150,000 a year to continue to patch the sidewalks. So I think they are underfunded, so I'm not sure, but
There's
a lot of different questions here.
I think we're getting a little away from
the process, if the money is in the budget,
Right.
how does it get approved?
Okay.
The select board has purview over the streets and sidewalks, so typically there's like a public hearing the same way there is for changes in parking. And then we,
Yeah, but I mean,
Vote
just
on it.
usually, and at least since the 2 years that I've been here, the select board doesn't approve purchases that the town makes. In fact, I mean, that's part of the issue that Ellen and I have identified, is that there I mean, you all don't really look at any of the financial documents and reports that a lot of towns typically do. So I just don't know, is there a question about would this money be spent in some other way than the rest of the $35 million that's in the budget?
I'm not sure what we're discussing.
So
Yeah,
I
I'm a
guess,
little confused,
so
too.
I guess what I brought up is, like Athos, maybe even more so, I'm kind of a belt and suspenders guy. So 14.8%, if that's where we are on I'd love to see a little more. So the question is, in considering adjustments between the 20,000 in ARPA 24 and 30,000 in ARPA 25 and 50,000 in the budget, the 100,000 toward placemaking, is there a little room to nudge us up to 50? Is there a little where, I know you tightened on some of the planning work and you found some money. Is there a little money to be found there to get us to 15%? That's all.
I don't think so. And I think that questions like that would have been helpful to have ahead of time so that we had time to look through the budget. And, we spent a lot of time, Ellen and I, and a number of other departments and staff after the last meeting based on the questions that you all raised. So we had a conversation about what we wanted to cut out of the budget, and that conversation resulted in two of you requesting 2 additional expenses to be put into the budget.
Correct, but then we've seen the undesignated fund balance in a different place than we were at the last meeting, so I think it's entirely appropriate that we talk about ways to get the undesignated fund balance to where we'd like it to be, so I don't think it's out of place.
Sure, it's actually the same place that it was in the last meeting, because we had the 77,000 in there that was a mistake, so the number is about the same.
Can I just jump in on it? Carrie, I'm pretty happy with 14.8 being so close, if it's within our 10 to 15% guideline.
Okay.
It's pretty darn close to 15.
It's pretty close.
Yeah. So don't mean to sideline you, but I think we should.
I can live with 14.8.
Okay. I understand where you're going though. And
Okay.
Nobody. Yeah, we don't want to spend more than we should spend. Just in trying to frame our discussion today, the other things which we were going to look at, we've talked about the undesignated fund balance for a period of time. There's an update, I think we could talk about the percent fund update and inclusion, health insurance costs. These are just listing things you put in here, Alex, and then there were some other free-form thoughts with respect to other places we can address money. Should we talk about the percent fund and where that's sitting with us? There's a sum of 131,253,000 allowable draw, is what I understand. Kari, that's the right number, right?
Yes, that is the right, well, that's the number we've been given.
Yep. And where that sits, at the moment, correct me please, it's not sitting in the budget, correct?
No, it is.
It is in the budget, but it is tax neutral because it's placed in the budget as a transfer from the trust, but then also as an expense item.
Okay.
That would, only be spent at, recommended projects by the select board, approved by the trustees.
So this is basically the same as the amount for the child care pilot program in the downtown district, right? Is that these are placeholders for future spending. They don't authorize the money, so there's no application. This doesn't create an application that goes to the trustees for any percent money. The same way that putting in money for the downtown district doesn't create the assessment, or putting in money for the child care pilot doesn't create the child care program. These are all budget allocations that allow those conversations to happen in the future, where the select board would take an action, an additional vote in a select board meeting, and that would then send, let's say the select board decided to send, $131,000 of proposed programs to the trustees. Whenever that process is sort of clarified, that would be the sort of decision point about actually spending the money from the select board.
So when we put this budget before the town voters in a month, a little more than a month, these programs that you just identified require the select board to make a decision as to whether to move forward on the child care, whether to move forward on the executive director for downtown. that's what you're
Yeah,
saying
we've
right
been
now.
clear, there's a whole bunch of steps of decisions the select board has to make for any of those programs to move forward.
So we're not gonna hear on May 15th that because the town supported the budget, that those are fait accompli, that they're,
No, and
There are
I
projects that
wrote
are
it in the
gonna
memo,
happen.
too. I mean, we talked about it in the last meeting, I also wrote it in the memo, but so for example, with the childcare, right, I put in the memo that even if, let's say, you had, some runaway town staff who said, after, the town meeting on May 14th and on May 15th, all right, we're starting a childcare program today, you all have to add the positions to the organizational chart because we don't have positions to run a childcare service. So those have to be added by the select board to the organizational chart. And for the childcare, for example, again, in some scenario where town staff are running rogue and trying to start a rogue childcare program, no comment on how good or bad that even would be for the community, but the select board also has to set the fees for that, and it's not in the rate and fee schedule because we've never offered that service before. So, every year we have to set the rates and fees. Same with the downtown district. I described in last meeting and in the memo as well that the downtown district requires the state law is the select board has to create an advisory board. That advisory board, you all have to appoint the people to the advisory board. That advisory board has to make a recommendation back to the select board, and the select board has to vote. Those steps are all identified in state law. So both of those programs, and same with the Brissette funding, all putting things in the budget does is allow us to continue to work on them. So basically, if there was no money in the budget for the child care pilot, then I would have to tell staff, you can't work on the child care center, right? You have to stop all work on that. Same way that if we didn't put money in for the Brissette funding, the select board is supposed to talk about it, but there could be no decisions made in FY25 because we wouldn't have had any money in the budget for that pass through. So all these things do is enable a future step. And for each of those three examples, and there may be other things like this in the budget, but for each of those three examples, there are multiple things that the select board would have to do before anything happened. Does that answer that question?
yes.
Okay. Should we finish? Sorry.
I mean, I think that for me, I feel like a lot, as you said, a lot of work has to be done on the proposals, and we have to have a thorough vetting in the community to make sure it's viable before we create new positions in the budget that will have long-term impact on the budget.
Great.
And I guess I am concerned that those two initiatives potentially seed in fiscal 26 with additional positions, whether it's 2 childcare positions, a downtown executive director. So that's, the budget as positioned is, I think, 0.1, or is it 1.0 FTEs, or maybe it's 1.8, including the half.
0.8 plus the one accounting HR analyst.
Right.
So 1.8, yeah.
So 1.8. So if we're effectively funding positions that, okay, granted, there may be touch points for the select board, that's an additional 3 positions. And, big picture, when we think about fiscal year 26, as I find myself in a very unusual position, which is I fully endorse and applaud the work that's been done with respect to our contracts, and it's a big package, which we're not going to talk about tonight, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we're not talking about it tonight. But I'm supportive of that, but I'm concerned about the budget because we lose flexibility to the extent that we're as effectively seating positions in fiscal years 26 and beyond. Headcount is one of the few things that the select board is going to be able to control, given that the contracts are kind of on COLA autopilot for the most part. So it's one of the few things we can control. And if it gets down to job descriptions where we object about a job description, and that starts to become it starts to become an awkward conversation. So again, I'm sort of concerned about effectively authorizing the money for positions. I understand the headcount are not in there, but the money for headcount is in there. And the context is that the out-year budget concerns are large. I think right now we're looking at a trajectory for spending and tax increases. By my estimation, I've shared this with the select board. I haven't heard any pushback on it. That's likely to be high single-digit % tax increases, well above inflation. If we layer in needed capital spending, which is necessary and quite large, it could be double-digit. And I'm comfortable locking in additional spending now for new positions. When we have potentially difficult choices, might even have to reverse those initiatives in the future. And are those really the highest and best uses for incremental spending in fiscal year 26? I'm concerned. It's hard to say from the vantage point of today, but I would argue in favor of keeping our options open. I realize these positions are largely, if not entirely, self-supporting. However, the downtown ED position, as described, will end up being part of the budget with benefits and perhaps part of the salary being borne in fiscal year 26, as you described, Alex. And never heard of an ED who doesn't want additional staff. So there's potentially some additional support that might be needed. With respect to the child care initiative, it wouldn't be surprising at all if there were additional startup costs beyond those projected. Further, the business model as proposed with higher compensation than the competition and more affordable rates, that's just inherently very challenging to pull off. So, and if we pay more and charge less, how do we balance the books? So, and I have a little bit more. I'm sorry, thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair. As to process, this all came very, very late in the process. They haven't been widely discussed in the community. I think we absolutely need to get these things right. The child care initiative is a huge deal. I think we have to ask ourselves if the town of Hanover should even be in the business of running a full-fledged child care center. We desperately need affordable child care in this community, but should this be the town's business? Can we truly deliver a product that will live up to the high expectations of our clients, the community, at a break-even price? We have alternatives that could be considered, including public-private partnerships, subsidies for town employees, a joint venture with existing or proposed operations, incentives for a private operator to enter the market, just a lot of other options. So I'm concerned about that. And then with respect to execution, we have a lot on our plate already that we're not, we could do more on affordable housing. So I'm concerned that we're trying to be too ambitious. Not that there's a tremendous amount of work that's been put into this budget. I applaud it. I respect all the work, but I think we're trying to do maybe a bridge too far and be a little bit too ambitious. So those are some of my concerns. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I mean, well, I just come back to the point that there's a crying need out there for this. I'm talking only about childcare, not the executive director for the downtown. We can talk about that in a second. There's a clamoring need for it, and the way it was described to us at our March 18th meeting was in a pilot format so that we could investigate whether or not we have the appropriate setup. It seemed a pretty risk-free approach to me to allow us to investigate whether or not we have gotten this right, and could we get it right, and how do we get it right before we branch out. Those are my simple thoughts. I can tell you, just one more second. Since I got quoted in the Valley News, the number of people who have reached out to me in support of this has been monumental.
Yeah, and I, where I lie, I'm 5/8 Canadian, right? So I'm a huge advocate for childcare, 5/8, yeah. And we're in desperate need of it, just as we're in desperate need of affordable housing. We have for 3 years worked on affordable housing and we haven't been able to move. We have a lot of things happening in the town. I think we have challenges with our facilities that we don't even know about. That's one of our initiatives, our budget initiatives, is to look at our facility condition. I really think that we need to spend a lot more time working on the childcare proposal so we truly understand what we're getting ourselves into. And so I concur with Carrie. I think I think the staff should be given, we've talked about the importance of, we're moving social services into Parks and Rec. to oversee that. We've also talked about the importance this year of really digging deep into our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade recreation programs and seeing if we can get that into the middle school. And I think that if we can move that programming out of Parks and Rec and at the same time dive more deeply and develop a really comprehensive childcare program and talk to our neighbors. I mean, the city of Lebanon announced spending $10 million on building a 200 child facility, and perhaps there's an opportunity for us to work with them, because I think space is one of the biggest limiting factors that we have for the Parks and Recs program. So I really think that should come out of the budget, even though there's a chance that it's net zero and that's how it's in the budget. I just think it's too much for this year. And I do think it came in on February 27th was the first time and perhaps it came in before, but it was the first time I heard about it. And, we all know there's a need, but I agree with Carrie on this one.
And by the way, I apologize. I was particularly inarticulate, but I did actually, I was kind of reading from my statement. So I'm actually going to pass out my statement if that's okay. So you'll see the way I should have said it, rather than the way it came out, and I can have a few copies for the audience too.
And maybe it's important to do also a couple clarifications on a few process-related things. So, starting with, and I think Brissette and the downtown and the childcare are all in the same boat, right? They're all placeholders for things that we don't know exactly what we're going to spend the money on. And so, one is on the downtown. It is not money for an FTE. Right, it's money for downtown activities in the category that we've identified. That was one of the ideas, but you all would have to create the advisory board. That advisory board would work with you and with the stakeholders to develop the budget, the boundaries, the proposal. Right, so that was one idea for that, but it is not money for an FTE or a staff person. Just to make that clear, it's not what's in the budget. Both of those things, all of these things, Brissette, childcare, and the downtown district are not, do not have a net tax impact on the community. Right? If the childcare program doesn't start, then we don't hire the staff. The risk is on the users for the program, and we specifically designed a program like that because even though the need is great, and there are other communities doing more than Hanover, like Lebanon, who I've talked to today about it, that is, we have designed a program that doesn't put the taxpayers at risk with the goal of trying to get something going. I think from a process standpoint, I guess part of what's a little hard to understand is, there's been expressions of interest from a number of members of the select board to be involved in discussions earlier in the process. That's what this looks like. That's what we're doing. Right, we didn't take a fully baked plan to you all because you all asked us to not work with you that way, right? That you want to see things in process. These are in process. Because of town meeting, we have to make decisions once a year about what to include in the budget. So you can't really have your cake and eat it too. Joanna, if you say we're not putting any money in the budget for childcare, then I direct staff not to work on childcare, right? I can't tell the staff to work on something that the select board and town meeting has specifically decided to not fund. It's actually illegal in the state of New Hampshire to do that. So if there is an interest in looking at developing a program, then the appropriate thing to do is to put it in the budget. And then that allows us to continue to design and build out the program, identify the rates and fees, identify the kind of staff that you need, come back with a more detailed business plan. But once a year, we have to make a decision about what to include in the budget. So every time we've got stuff in our budget, they're going to land in 3 different potential spots. One is there are things that will have to have waited a long time, right? So like the conservation easements, when we get to town meeting, Lebanon's been kind of waiting on us because we can only make decisions once a year about that. We couldn't do it through the 4114A process per our attorney. So there are things that will be on the town meeting. We wanted to do the green burials, if you all recall that conversation about 6 months ago. We can't do that until we have a warrant article at town meeting that authorizes yourself or me to play the role of cemetery trustee. So there's certain things that, because we can only make certain decisions once a year, that will be sort of sitting and waiting around. There are other things that will be a little bit early. The childcare, a little bit on the earlier side. The downtown district, a little bit on the earlier side. And Brissette funding, a little bit on the earlier side, right? Those are all things that if we could make budget decisions a couple months from now, you'd probably be ready to make the decision with all the information that you want to see before making a decision. And then very rarely, there's things in the Goldilocks zone, right? Where it's like right at the exact same time that we would have been talking about it anyway. So there's always going to be things on that continuum from a little too late to a little bit too early. Again, we've got all of those things in our budget and queued up for town meeting this year, but if you want the staff to continue working on a childcare program, you have to put money in the budget for it, right? I am not allowed to direct staff to work on something that you all have specifically said do not fund.
That's not completely true. You can do feasibility studies and do research and do your homework to have a draft proposal without having, you have that discretion as a manager to do
I do not, actually. So the state of New Hampshire does not give that discretion. And if town meeting zeroes out something in the budget, we cannot work on it. Right. So we're having a conversation about it, right? If we hadn't had any of this conversation, but if I go and I have a meeting with the select board, and the select board says we are not putting money in the budget for this, we're not working on this, and town meeting doesn't fund a program, not only am I in certainly at minimum a gray area legally to say, staff, I know select board said no, and I know town meeting didn't authorize you to do it, but I'm gonna ask you to spend taxpayer funded time on this project. Gray area whether we should do that or not, but also considering that we have very short staff, we're overly burdened, especially in a lot of departments like Parks and Rec, it would not be I would be a bad manager if I said, even though we don't have any money for this program in FY25, I want you to spend a lot of time working on this program in FY25.
Okay, so I don't see the downside to putting the money in, if we're gonna be doing a pilot program. I know you two disagree with me. I want to hear from Kari. Your arm is gonna get.
That's okay. So Kari Asmus, Chair of the Finance Committee, and I do have two Finance Committee members here tonight who may want to either amplify or sort of redirect some of my comments. But this was a topic that was discussed at our Finance Committee meeting last Thursday. I am sorry to report, because this is the first time that I've had something like this to report since I've been chair, but the conversation veered towards, because of the concerns that were raised tonight by by two select board members, that this plan, are speaking to the childcare. Are the revenues solid? How do you pay for substitutes when there's no substitute pay in the budget? Where is the money for the payroll taxes? It just sort of goes on and on, as well as some of the other questions. So what, when considering this and the downtown service district, the
Can
question
we
arose.
keep them separate, Kari?
Okay, but it arose to both, so just
I understand.
but how, can the Finance Committee, is the Finance Committee comfortable endorsing a budget that has this in it? And I would say that's not a question that's been answered tonight by information that we've gotten. I don't know that it can be.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
In light of what Alex was just saying, and the known demand in the town for such services, yes, there are alternatives, of course, but would it not be appropriate to put the sum of money in the budget in a net
I guess, one of the
budget zero?
questions would
Excuse
be.
me, let me just finish.
Yeah.
Working out those details. Those are all details which need to be figured out.
So I guess one of the questions, and I have to say that, the program as we understand it right now is that you would hire 2 people on July 1st. And then if you decided not to go forward with the program, you'd have a month or 2 of salary that wasn't covered by revenues, and you'd have 2 new employees that you would have to say, we're sorry, we don't have a job for you after all. So to the question of how do you carry this forward, one of the questions that I brought up at the February presentations, there's this $10,000 for a regional homelessness assistance in the HR budget. And now that you all have looked at the guidelines for social service agencies, you realize that when there's an appropriation like that, it needs to be for Hanover residents. We heard at that presentation that we don't even have a social services agency in mind for that 10,000. So, when talking about, all these sort of little pots of money, where are they, how are they best used? I would say, well, what about that 10,000? Could it be used to, I don't know whether it would be a consultant that would look at how best to implement childcare in fiscal year 26, but that's one possibility to get around some of the concerns without moving fast forward. And then I think, to be honest, I've told some of you that one of the things that's a little stressful for me as being chair is that I want I want us to all move together. And I think that doing something like that without having conferred with anybody else on the finance committee might be a way, in terms of you haven't talked about downtown, so I won't talk about that yet. But I just wanted to, while you were talking, to let you know that there's really grave concern about putting this program forward. And even though there's the hope that it could be revenue neutral, we've seen many, I can think of 4 or 5 instances in the past 5-6 years, where we were said revenue neutral, fast forward, and it's not. And for the reasons that have been stated about the other things that are that we need to be concerned about. We just need to be really careful. When we look at the budget, are there the dollars in the budget that are appropriate for the services that we need in the coming year? But we also look at, are we putting the town in a good situation for the years to come? Sometimes we can tee that up better than others. But there's just a lot of questions about whether the way we're looking at things right now, are teeing things up in a good way for the town in the next coming years.
Thank you, Karen.
I have a suggestion. Since we are, and I read the 2 new employees in July 1 for this study, or to evaluate it. Percent funds are very clear in terms of funding for programming, new ideas, doing things above and beyond what your tax dollar does. There's $131,000 available to the select board to apply to programming that we see fit. Trustees, they have to say, does it fit or does it not? But we have that decision-making power. I suggest that we put both of these really good initiatives, childcare and downtown executive director, we use that money to do the thorough planning and design for both of those programs. So we can thoroughly assess space, thoroughly assess what's needed for permitting, thoroughly assess costs associated with childcare and associated with making downtown more amazing. And use that money that way. And it's a simple, we have an application process that we need to sign off on, but we can do that. It totally fits in, enhancing the community, the Hanover community, by making our downtown more vibrant and providing childcare and something that we're not currently doing. And so I think it fits the percent guidelines very well, and it kind of gets rid of, it's like a stone that takes out. We do 3 things. I'm screwing up my idioms, but basically we're killing I don't want to kill a bird. I'll stop there. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say is here's maybe a solution, and it's money, and it goes to what you're saying, Alex, is that it's feasibility when the select board can sign off on a programming effort for both of these important pieces.
Ellen? What are the two budget items for those two? The childcare and the downtown?
So the downtown is $50,000. Childcare is, I actually have to open up that budget to take a look. Again, that is, oh man. I'm thinking about the easiest way.
It's north of $200,000.
That's what I thought.
I thought it was 140.
Yeah, I thought it was 147.
It's
but I didn't want to
147.
speak off the top of my head.
140,000.
Yeah, that's what we have.
Yeah.
But can you tell, does that include payroll taxes? Does that include substitute staffing when staff is on vacation because you have 2 people in there?
So it is an excellent question as far as the substitutes, and I would have a hard time speaking to that, but the payroll tax, the benefits, that has been accounted for.
Okay, where's that shown? Because 15,000 wouldn't cover both healthcare and payroll taxes.
But that's, you know,
Yeah,
we have a ballpark figure, right?
I mean,
$140,000.
it's not even really
Yep.
ballpark. It'd be another
It's gonna be,
20,000.
and it's
for
not even
payroll
substitutes.
taxes.
You're gonna need more than 2 staff for 12 kids.
Yes.
Okay,
Actually, because it is a public hearing, if I could ask another finance
yeah,
committee
2
member.
seconds. Thank you. Yes, Susan.
Yeah, I just have a question of why we would be paying payroll taxes and substitutes and so forth if all we're doing is looking at feasibility. Because as soon as we get a 1-year-old in a crib, it's gonna be hard 6 months later to say to those parents, your 1-year-old is out of here. So I think that there's a big difference between looking at, is this all feasible, and actually having a staff person, there taking care of that 1-year-old.
But because it is a public hearing, if the other
Yeah.
finance committee member, because I don't
Sure.
really want to
Of course.
speak entirely for it.
Thanks. John Dole, also on the Finance Committee.
Yes.
And I think Nancy just stole my thunder. I was going to make the point that the budget that's been put forward for the child care program is effectively a budget for going out and starting a child care program. You hire 2 people, you would get materials and other startup costs covered for hiring people to bring in children to take care of starting on September 1st. That's not a feasibility study. What you were talking about, Nancy, and you, Joanna, would be a feasibility study. And I think what some funding, not necessarily the amount that's in the proposal, some amount of funding could be put forward to support a feasibility study, which would be just that, a feasibility study to study the market and the resources required to deliver an effective child care program that we brought to the select board with a full implementation plan, a full budget that could be acted upon later in the year, either using percent funds or, if it takes longer than that to get it together, to make it a part of next year's budget proposal. But the amount of money you're talking about is explicitly designated for starting a program that would bring children in to be cared for on September 1.
That's how I read it.
Yeah,
That's how I read it.
the pilot program.
I don't know what the appropriate budget allocation might be for a feasibility study that would give Alex the basis for having town resources study the matter and develop a thorough proposal. That would have to be some.
Well, the other alternative is to utilize. We could do both. I mean, we could utilize the percent for the feasibility study and authorize authorize the funding at the same time to get it going within the next fiscal year.
So we needn't necessarily determine the amount right now. That could be determined later under the context of authorizing spending under Brissette. Is that correct?
Well, I think
Well,
there's
no,
two
but that's
things.
not gonna cover it.
Well, wouldn't cover.
It might.
Would cover a feasibility study. It wouldn't cover. What are you saying it wouldn't cover?
Well, let's say it takes a month to get the feasibility. I mean, I think John and his staff have done a pretty solid look into this.
Who has?
The
Our
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec director.
And I have to go back to that report, but I don't have it in front of me, but I'm not sure how much more time they would need to prove to us that it is feasible. A month, maybe two.
Is this a public report?
Yeah, they presented it in public.
It was
Just
a
what they
one
presented.
pager.
Yeah.
You mean the one page?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I share your skepticism.
And Athos, for whatever it's worth, I agree. We have 3 staff who are all professionals in this field, who've all been working in this field longer than anybody up here has, who run these services, very similar services currently for children in our community. And certainly if the select board wanted to spend money on hiring consultants, that's certainly an option. I would just say that we have the staff in-house, we can do the work. We don't need to pay outside consultants to help us figure out how to do it. Sometimes it's really valuable to do that, and sometimes we start getting in paralysis by analysis direction.
Yeah, and I don't want to wait a whole year.
I just have a question.
What we would be in this.
Right, that's exactly what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, I have a question about how pilots are run in this space. I think I know we have a real need for childcare. I'm a big fan of piloting things and seeing what works. Nancy raises some good points about yanking the child back out of childcare. I'm just wondering, I don't know this field, as you said, these other people do, I don't. What does a pilot look like in this field? Like, how do we set it up so that we're not letting people down, you know? And we're actually doing a pilot where we could learn something from it.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think the pilot idea is a 1-year program. That's the intent of the pilot portion of it, that it's not something that we would expect to be doing every single year, but we try it for a year and sort of, see how it goes. I think we'd want to talk about understanding whether we're meeting community needs or not, and understand how we would measure whether the program is successful. I mean, the day after the Valley News article, Parks and Rec already had residents in Hanover calling, asking to be put on a non-existent wait list for the program. So I think we all know the demand is going to be there. And there are other ways to design the program where you're actually taking deposits that are non-refundable and hiring staff. So there's plenty of ways to start a program like this without actually incurring some of the risk that was described here tonight. But at the end of the day, I think the answer, as best I can, Jenny, and we didn't invite the Parks and Rec staff, wasn't aware that there was going to be this level of conversation tonight about this. I thought we had kind of gone through all these questions already. But certainly I know they would be happy to produce more reports and to come back once they have the go-ahead to continue working on it. And I guess one question I might ask is, what's the worst that can happen here? What are people, so there's not a net tax impact to the taxpayers. And I guess I'm just curious, I mean, I've worked with our staff in putting this together. I have spent a tremendous amount of time in our community, talking to community members and getting questions about this. We've lost 3 staff, maybe 4 staff over the last year and a half townwide who have left their jobs in Hanover because there's no childcare available in Hanover. Those are all pretty real consequences. So I guess, and maybe it's something that we haven't explained properly, but what are folks worried about? What's the consequence here of putting money in the budget that doesn't have a tax impact to continue exploring and working on this program? What's the actual consequence?
My first reaction is rising expectations that we can't meet. We know we don't have space. We know that if we have 12 more small bodies in the Parks and Recs, that we have to sacrifice either program rooms or office space or something. They already came and told us that fact. We have the problem with offering one or two people a job that we know possibly, I mean, if we do eyes open pilot, we know that is a 1-year contract. That's, not usually our way of dealing with other human beings. And as I said, the whole question for me, because I frankly don't think that the numbers are solid. I don't think that the amount of money that we're asking people to pay is the correct amount. I think it's higher, actually. And so we have an entire Parks and Rec building that is reconfigured for 12 small humans, and in 12 months it doesn't work. No, I think that it's better to take our time, really look at it. And I don't doubt that people are coming to Athos and people are coming to you and saying we desperately need childcare. We need that all over America. We need better, parental leave policies. We need a whole lot of things that are better about taking care of small people. So that's
I appreciate you articulating those concerns, Nancy. And I think the physical space one is certainly one of the biggest challenges in this proposal. However, and we're nowhere near ready to talk about it publicly, but there's several different private properties that we're already in conversations with, very, very, very early, because of course we don't even know if we're doing this yet, that could actually work within the budget that we have, which is pretty exciting. I'll also say from the staff standpoint, it would be pretty disruptive to move everything around for a year and then not. But I would also say, I think one of the things that, especially in Parks and Rec, they're excited about this. They want to do it. They want to give this a shot, even if it's disruptive, even if it doesn't last forever. I think we all see the need. They've lost 2 or 3 employees because of a lack of childcare issues. And so I think they would really appreciate the sort of empathy as saying, like, we don't want you to run in one direction and run in the other direction. But I also think they have come to us with this proposal. They want to see this done. They see the need. And I think the staff are excited about doing it. So I would just offer that as well, for whatever that's worth.
All right, we need to get out of this discussion. We need to move forward. So there has been a proposal. I forgot what the number was. The 135,000, if I'm not incorrect. Ellen, what was the number in the budget again, please?
For Brissette?
No,
Or for the
childcare.
childcare is 140,400 of expense.
I mean, one thing we could do is cover most of that with Brissette money. And what else?
No, I think
well,
you're right.
If I can just, I'm not sure I would, Ellen or Kari are certainly better experts than myself on the Brissette Fund. I'm not sure I would agree with the characterization that the Brissette funds are easy to understand. I think the town has actually gotten itself in quite a bit of trouble over the last few years by not knowing that definition and by not even communicating between the trustees and the select board. Sure. And that the town has literally written checks that the trustees will not cash. So I don't think it's fair at all to say it's easy, and I think it's not.
Okay.
Say Brissette will do it.
Fine, strike that idea.
We don't know, and the trustees need to vote on it, and that's their prerogative, not the select board's. The trustees determine whether that money can be dispersed based on the rules of the trust. The select board operates within that framework. Is that about right? Yeah. The select board doesn't get to decide. The trustees do.
But I think what was being talked about was a feasibility study through the Brissette Fund, not that they would fund the salaries of employees.
Right, no. I mean, the idea was, and the Brissette funds say, it's money to be spent on programs, not bricks and mortar. And so the thinking, what I was suggesting is, give Parks and Rec time to better build out their proposal, and check with other opportunities in terms of what's out there. Put together a proposal with using Brissette money, and I think Athos, what you were trying to do is say,
I'm trying to have my
okay,
cake
have,
and eat it
and what I'm saying is build out the proposal, and then there's $140,000 in the budget for this pilot program. So I mean, we could potentially frame it that way, but only after the feasibility shows that you can do it for 140,000 or 150, and it's a
Okay.
pass-through cost. Like,
So are you suggesting keeping, and they have all gotten tied together, but you're suggesting this childcare and or the downtown, that you want them to be studied first, that you want to put the money in the budget, but you don't want the money to be spent until a study is done, which could perhaps be funded by the percent fund?
I could live with that, because I want to see, this is a proposal that doesn't feel, it feels like it needs a little more work in my mind, on both of them. And as you've said, there's socialization and there's community feedback, and then there's like the physical constraints of space. And so
Okay.
if we can say, okay, let's do a more in-depth evaluation of the childcare thing, and more in-depth understanding of what the finance, the executive director, the finance district is, we have that material. We have time to actually dive deeply and understand it, and that budget implications in terms of exactly, is it two staff, is it 3 staff, is it 4 staff, you know?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and so therefore we can have our cake and eat it too.
Well, I'm one voice, there's 4 of you,
Well, no, that's
and the
two.
finance committee.
So there's 3 others.
And I would just, I'm gonna switch hats for a moment now to say, trustee of the trust funds, and what you're suggesting, for the funds to, fund a study has never been asked of before. So I cannot begin to say what the 3 trustees, or even 1 trustee, would say about that. We did have a meeting with, an attorney, town attorney, and he pointed to the examples that are in the trust where the Brissettes talked about programming from out of the center, or at the Howe Library, for example. And sort of what comes to mind in the examples are people actually doing things, residents of Hanover, and not soft costs. And I'm wondering if a feasibility study is kind of more of the soft costs needed for a real activity. I just wanted to say, I'm a trustee, and I wouldn't presume to know what the answer on that would be.
Okay.
And maybe Ellen can chime in.
Well, I agree. I think, you know, as the trustees sort of address
Each
new
thing.
situation, it's going back to the trust and trying to understand and trying to figure out what is in the spirit and the letter of the trust and the Brissette's intent. And so I agree. It's not, definitely not clear cut.
And can I ask a question too? I'm assuming, just to make sure I understand, it's not, the select board would like an outside consultant to help, but it's not, we don't have to spend the percent money on it. For example, let's say we finish up this fiscal year and there's extra money in a consulting line. I'm guessing that you wouldn't be opposed to studying it earlier than the start of the new fiscal
Alex,
year. That each of these things just needs additional study.
Yes.
And perhaps with an outside group, but I think what you're saying is it doesn't have to be.
No. I think what we want to see is more than a 1-page Excel spreadsheet outlining all the contingencies, and therefore I'm thinking that we could still appropriate the money
And that
for the project.
Right.
So,
And that you're telling me
Yes.
as the town manager, you can't spend any of that money
right,
until we come back and you all feel satisfied with the level of detail about the
Yes.
plans.
yes. And where the funding comes from is important, but not a cut and make or break. Jenny, we haven't heard from you too much. Where are you falling on this?
I think it's interesting to get a pilot. I think pilots are an interesting way to study thought I did say this, sorry, and then I think we have a need for childcare. I am curious how I don't have a picture from what I have so far on how that pilot works.
Okay, okay.
I'm, you know,
So you want
I
more
did
study.
do a co-op preschool, so I know that the numbers are hard to make work out because we did a lot of the treasury function. Yeah, that was a long time ago, not really in that business. And yeah, it would be nice to have more of a picture of, you know, so I picked up on 1 year, like a pilot would be like a 1 year thing. That's, you know, I didn't even know, is that 6 months, is that 3, you know?
I think it was a year.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and again, I think, like you guys are articulating this idea of contingencies and how do you deal with, you know, somebody's sick and you need another
Yep.
teacher,
Got it.
it's a big deal.
Carrie,
We had chickens at our co-op, I recommend that.
what was that chicken on the Dartmouth Green?
Chicken
thing?
on the green
Yeah,
today.
chickens.
Why?
Yeah.
Carrie, is this moving towards something that you're
So if
less uncomfortable with?
If we truly have veto power that is guaranteed on both these proposals, I could live with it being in the budget, so long as we truly have that veto power.
Okay. Nancy?
Yes, I echo his concern.
Okay, so we're moving forward on that.
Yep,
Thank
John
you.
has
Roland
Of course, it's a public meeting.
Oh, good, thank you.
Hearing, public hearing.
Hello, public.
If you're going to move forward and seek, you've been calling it a feasibility study, but I think you might properly think of it as an RFP. Just as if you were going to the private sector for a proposal on delivering a new service, you would ask the vendor, you would indicate what specifications you want to see in a proposal. You would have the vendor respond to that in detail, and you would then have to vet those responses. But the report, Athos, just to be clear, that you referred to that was delivered earlier, is actually a 12-line spreadsheet, including the total line and the header. So there's not a lot of information there.
I was including the 2 public meetings that we had with them in the report. To be
In the report.
The verbal.
The verbal, okay.
We had a long discussion with John and Nicole and Liz at our March 18th meeting, and
Granted, what I'm getting at is you just as you would not want to spend money on a private vendor without a comprehensive proposal from that vendor, you would not want to do it in this case either.
Thank you.
I guess I would just ask if in this process, would there be a way to get more public input? I mean, obviously there is a need, there's demand. I think there's self-selection in who calls whom, because who I've heard from are the people who are, 2 people in particular, who are concerned that they've heard that it would be exempt from licensing. And as one said, I wouldn't want to send my child to a program that's not licensed, and I didn't know what to say. I don't even know why that person chose me, you know. But I know that Nancy and Carrie know this from being on the school board. We're a community that cares passionately about child care, and we don't necessarily go for the cheapest, fastest option. There's a lot of desire to have quality of program, and now, you know, putting on school board hat emeritus, I can say even at the Ray School, where we have an incredibly talented staff, we have come very close to one in particular unfortunate situation. And you know, if something can go wrong, it can go wrong, and whether it's medically or something that's inappropriate. And I know that people in our community would want to have absolutely, you know, gold standard program.
Thank you, Karen. Now, we didn't explicitly talk about this, but what we sort of did. The downtown, are we wrapping that into this project as well? Into the same proposal as well?
Well, we're saying that what we want as
Yes.
Carrie said,
Okay.
veto power. And, you know,
Right, I just wanna
I
make sure
think,
it
I
was
think
clear.
it's well documented.
Yes, yeah, and I think, and again, on that one as well, it just was very vague. And what is being planned and which taxpayers would end up paying for it? Will a person on May 14th, when they're at town meeting voting, do they know whether they're in the best business district or not? That is fair information for any voter to know. Do we know which properties would be in and which properties would be out?
We have what we have discussed that was on the books from the 2004 vote at town meeting. But as we were discussing a moment ago, those boundaries have to be decided by the advisory board, but the select board has to create and then appoint, and then they have to report back to the select board, and then the decision is made about where the boundaries are. I think we could guess, and we could show the map, and we could certainly list out the properties, which are all commercial properties in the downtown.
Right.
And co-op.
So,
But
right.
Well, it wouldn't.
And that proposal came in on March 18th,
Sorry.
so.
It wouldn't be the old version necessarily, because I thought.
So again, I think we're,
Well, the old
we're
version
all
is-
getting super ahead of it because we can't make the decision until the steps are all out of order here, right? The end of the line of the steps is the advisory board being created, the select board appointing people, that group studying it, coming back with a recommendation. It's specifically identified in the statute that the advisory board has to come back to the select board. The select board then basically approves or modifies the boundaries. That, along with the budget to be raised, then creates the assessment or the tax rate, because then you know how many properties there are and you know what the total budget is. So that's like way off in the future. I think that what at least the working group that has been discussing this so far is basically saying that it would probably match the boundaries from 2004. You don't see a huge change from that, but that would ultimately be up to the select board to determine. But if it's helpful, I agree. I mean, if someone should know if they would be part of that assessment district or not. And so I think what we would, I mean, not having made the final decision with the select board's permission, maybe in the explanatory statement, or it was not a warrant article, we'll find somewhere to list the properties, or maybe contact all the properties directly.
And just adjusting my comments to the chair, is that in 2004, when it was voted on, there was a map, and you could look at it, and you could know 100% when you were voting on it, I am in this or I am not in this. And
Well, the map is still there.
and so if you're going to say until the map is changed, you know, so that people can at least make the assumption
Okay,
that I was in 2004, so I'm in now, but it's not really fair to ask people to vote if they don't know whether or not they're gonna be taxed. So whether that map then still holds, that would be something to consider, but I think ask people to vote if they don't know if they're in or out is not a good practice.
okay.
And I guess one other question I had on the downtown business service district, we did find out that it does currently have a Fund 15. It has a negative balance of 30,000. I was wondering, you know, how the money then, once it comes in, is tracked, because I don't know how, you know, this hasn't been active for many years, or maybe it has been, I don't know. With the first 50,000 that comes in, would it,
I don't know the answer
Pay
to your
off the
question,
debt?
yeah.
I can
Ellen, what's in
comment
it?
on that,
Yeah.
Kari.
Yes.
So, one of the adjusting journal entries for fiscal year '23 will take care of that. It is already accounted for in the undesignated fund balance calculations that we have seen. And I can tell you that the expenses that were charged there were all charged in 21 and 22, and were not, although they were associated with the downtown district activities, they were certainly not under the auspices of the downtown district.
so what mechanism then is in place to have oversight for this fund going forward? I guess the committee that would be decided upon? Because obviously there's
That's a good
been something
question,
that's been happening, and we would want to make sure that whatever the new system is, that it's not like the old system.
It's a good question, Carl.
Generally true.
We don't have an answer for that.
I
That's a
mean,
good question.
and I would say that's my continuing role, certainly involvement of the hopefully new accounting resource that we would have, that we need a lot of attention. And as we've talked about, much broader reporting to the select board, and making sure that all of this information is accurate. And yes.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
And then, I don't know if you have anything else, there may be one sort of broader thing at the end.
Great, we're not done.
No, and there may be other people here who want
We're,
to speak as well, so thank you for allowing us.
Okay, I think if we've read our memos, we know that health insurance is hitting the max. There's not much to say about that. It's already in the budget, which is the good thing. The bad thing is it's hitting the max. And I'm running out of topics at the moment. Are there, Alex, did we want to talk about recycling, or you brought it in that memo, and it's a really good point. It is something which needs investigating in the future and could be a huge swing in how we're expending our expenditures
And our environmental impact.
and our environmental
I mean, I
impact.
think, you know, in
Do you want to spend 5 minutes? 5 minutes.
even less, I mean, ultra early conversations, but, you know, part of leading some of these conversations was going back to the budget, basically saying, all right, are there things that, you know, kind of are on the chopping block, that are not great uses of money, that aren't part of high priority goals, all that sort of stuff. And there wasn't a whole lot that was immediately obvious, but this was an area, Ellen and Pete kind of brought it up. And as soon as we discussed it, it was super interesting. The next day talked about it with Yolanda and Judy from Sustainable Hanover to make sure it wasn't going in some awful direction here. But in the ultra early stage of thinking about it, we've got basically we offer a free curbside single stream recycling program to Hanover residents. As most of us know, I think in 2024, most single stream zero sort commingled recycling that involves plastics isn't really getting recycled. Most of it is ending up in a landfill or being incinerated, which is also awful because I don't know if anyone's ever burned plastic. It's not great. That's how we're disposing of all of that. And we pay, and so the taxpayers at large, I apologize, I don't have the exact number of households that participate in the program, but it's much less than the total number of households in Hanover, but all the taxpayers in Hanover currently pay for that program for all Hanover, for the Hanover residents who use it. So even though going to the transfer station in Lebanon is free, minus the getting there, we offer this program, it's $300,000 a year, so we currently pay over $600 a ton to recycle single stream material, which is crazy. We pay $75 a ton to dispose of municipal solid waste. So $600 is it's an order of magnitude larger. And if it were the best, environmental thing in the world, and we were paying that much, but we said, okay, it's protecting everything and everything's getting recycled 100%, that might be a different story. But we basically know that probably 90% of that is going to landfill or being incinerated. So we're basically, I don't mean to put it this crassly, but we're sort of paying $1,000 to feel good about recycling plastic.
Yep.
So the idea was, could we spend the same amount of money or less amount of money accomplishing more from an environmental perspective? It just so happens that luckily or coincidentally or whatever, our contract with Casella that provides our zero sort recycling is actually up next fiscal year. So the select board in next year in the FY26 budget will need to make a decision one way or the other about what direction to go in, because we'll either have to RFP or issue that contract or do something else. So we just wanted to put, and I know Carrie, you've expressed, as a bunch of folks on the select board have expressed concerns about, as have Ellen and I, about future costs and what we're committing to. And we just wanted to at least plant the seed that there is this $300,000 chunk that very initially all of us are sort of very optimistic that we could spend less and accomplish more environmentally. The other tripod or leg to the stool is that we rewrote our sustainability position, which was a part-time position before that was really focused on energy aggregation. That position is, we have some great applications that have come in for it. We're starting interviews actually probably not this week, but next week. And that's gonna be a full-time, in-house position. And so we're pretty excited that plus the contract with Casella expiring, plus this big chunk of money, and we kind of know the truth, the nasty truth about single stream, that we have the option to make some really awesome and interesting decisions in future years about how to spend taxpayer money to accomplish environmental goals. So we haven't gotten any further than that in any of the conversations internally, but we did have the conversations, and I know there have been concerns expressed about future costs, which we all share. So I did want to at least put it on people's radar that this would probably be a high priority for this new sustainability coordinator to come back to work with Sustainable Hanover and come back with the select board, well in advance of next year's budget to start thinking through the options and probably doing a lot of community engagement to see, is it food waste, or is it continuing to do single stream but just not subsidizing it and just having the people who use the service pay for it? There's all sorts of different options. So
Yeah, this is
I
great.
think that was under 5 minutes.
It was under 5 minutes. You said you said way less.
I did.
It was not way
That
less.
was not true.
Hanover could be really at the forefront of doing really good things here. I'm sure other towns are tackling this as well, so we can learn with them.
Food waste is the big one that we're all kind of talking about.
Yeah.
Because that's nice because you're not recycling, but that supply chain, recycling aluminum and plastic and cardboard, those supply chains are totally out of our control once the material goes out to a sorting station. But food waste, if we wanted to, we could probably figure out a program that actually keeps that in Hanover or in the Upper Valley, all of that material, which is kind of cool. So we could actually have a much larger influence over the supply chain of that. Anyway, one idea.
Back to the FY25 budget. I have reached an end of what I had on topics. Are there other topics that the board wants to bring up?
Any other comments?
So the Finance Committee is meeting tomorrow night. Anybody want to come to another budget discussion? You're very welcome.
What time and place?
5 p.m. In the Community Lounge at the Black Community Center.
Food?
And, I was thinking about it, to be honest, because we've all been working very hard. If you want to bring some potluck. But again, we had this discussion about parts of the budget that we were more comfortable with than other parts, but even the core, what we were calling the core budget, we were not completely feeling that we understood it 100%. And I understand that part of that comes from the fact that so much of the increase in what we're calling the budget is through the contracts that have yet to be approved or ratified or whatever. However, it does sort of seem, and this was kind of getting at a question that was brought up earlier, but sort of the discretionary spending that is, in the budget, things that we don't necessarily have to do in the coming year. And I had asked some of these questions at the presentation level, but lots of questions. Didn't exactly hear back. So if we could just sort of go through it. Under appropriations, we have the town manager miscellaneous program, $50,000, and I think I heard tonight that maybe there's $30,000 of that is for placemaking, but I'm not sure. So do we have an understanding what that is and what that's being used for? I know that that was introduced in last year's budget, and at that point it was broken down into downtown activities, communication, and engagement, and now I'm forgetting what the third part was. But do we know what that 50,000 is?
So it's the same thing. We just, whenever we created the accounts, I think in this fiscal year, we just created one account. So it's the same breakdown.
Right, so it's for things that are more discretionary, but obviously contribute to, the culture of our town, etc. All right, and then there was the 25,000, that was the town manager miscellaneous expense. And I had asked if that was the contingency warrant article. It is, and is that going to be the contingency warrant article again this year? So it's not actually available for spending,
We will call that account something else.
pardon me?
We'll call that account something else to make it clearer.
Yes,
Can I say
I
what
can
that is?
Contingency.
yes.
Okay,
Create an
and
account.
then, and I saw that the other employees' benefits, was scaled back from 25,000 to 15,000, and last year, that was, to start some merit components to, the contracts that were adopted last year. But now that we're having, that built into the contracts more in a more definitive way, as I sort of understand it, is that 15,000, what is, and again, when I first started this list, I was over 100,000. And again, when we think about the Howe Library and other things, it wasn't necessarily to try to get the tax rate lowered, but again, just to make sure that the monies are being used in the best and highest way.
It would be for the same thing, and just to clarify, it's not money for the contracts, it's money for staff. Half of those staff are in unions, half are not in a union.
Okay, so
So it's the same use going forward, we're still sort of figuring out that merit-based program.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then again, just to add up, undesignated fund balance, yes, between, the 50,000 for public placemaking, ARPA, it was pending, between last year and this year, another 50,000, and then the budget account, 30,000, so about 130,000, for public placemaking versus, and I have to say, this is where you all are the policymakers, versus Howe Library, or versus some of those other things that were in Alex's memo about a wish list. So that's what you all are. All right, and then we learned about those funds recently, and there was Fund 13, a special purposes fund. It also has a negative fund balance, but it said in the current period it had $72,000 of revenue. Is that revenue that we can expect and that we could think about using some other way?
So I'll just comment, since I provided those numbers, and I did acknowledge to the Finance Committee that this would generate additional conversation. That all of those funds need, very careful analysis, and it is possible, Kari, I need to look at the specific sub-accounts in the special funds, because some of them are actually associated with recreation. So we need to break those out and determine. Today, I can't say that there are funds there to spend.
Okay, and I didn't necessarily mean to spend, but given that there was $72,000 of revenues in whatever period that covered, if we could expect also $72,000 in the next period.
Yeah, good question.
But we don't know. Okay, and I did see that, as I mentioned, there's the special recreation fund that had revenues of $33,000, and again, when we're talking about, I don't know where that came from, but as we're talking about, given that it says recreation, and we're talking about, I'm just trying to find money on trees here,
That's nice.
It's the Lower Grafton County Prosecutors Association has a balance of $6,000. I know we need to pay them. Trescott Company, ending balance of $204,000. I'm assuming that's restricted.
Yeah, that's
But
restricted.
again, there's a pot of money. And then lastly, and this goes to capital reserve funds, we did have the bridge replacement and repair capital reserve fund that you all, not you all because you weren't all elected then, but that we had said like 3 years ago that we were going to turn back to taxpayers, and then we decided let's wait for ARPA or whatever. But there is, also what I'm thinking about the CIPC's recommendation to start to act on the Howe Library. There's $195,000 in that account. It's not currently spoken for anything else. I'm sure we could, because we took out the bond for the bridges. So it's been sitting there. And Of course, you could put it, ask town meeting to put it together with roads or something like that. I'm sure we could find other uses for it. But currently, that's $195,000. It's sitting in account. It's been sitting there getting interest, thankfully. But that is being underutilized, and that several years ago, the idea was that it would be used, so.
So you're asking us to spend more money,
Yeah, I like
Cory?
it.
Well, but money that was
It's already
really,
been-
and,
Yeah.
I mean, and it could be discontinued and used to lower taxes. That
Yep.
is
Yeah.
possible as well. I just, I hear, the needs for services. I
Yep.
hear that we're at 6.5%.
That's
Thank you.
awesome, Kari, thank
Thank
you. Anything else?
Yeah, I don't know what the bridge fund can be spent on, but if it can be spent on roads adjacent to bridges, we've been talking about, and bridges, we've been talking about trying to improve the ability to come into Hanover over Ledyard Bridge, so it's safe for all users.
And at this point, it can only be used on bridges, so it would take a warrant article. It would take a warrant article
Yep.
to close that account. And then it could be used in any number of ways. If it were, then there could be a vote to put it into the roads capital reserve fund. Or it could go to fund something else that was in the budget, but it definitely would take a warrant article to close it.
Is that something, since we are going to shortly be drafting warrant articles, is that
Yes.
something we should take under advisement for the April 15th meeting? Is that something we want to liberate, that
We
$195,000?
can try to look at it.
Yeah, we need to look at it.
Maybe obviously talk to Pete, because, that was, what, a $900,000 bump, $50,000 bond for dealing with bridges. And we spent most of it.
It's all been spent.
Okay. So what's this $195,000 then?
So this is a capital reserve fund that's been in existence for an extended period of time. Kari, you may know the history of why we went out and bonded
It
the
was
work.
just that the cost of the
Money was
bridges
so
were
cheap.
outstripping the value of the capital reserve fund.
Yep.
And so we at the time and it was
Everyone.
a great bonding environment.
It's like 1% or it was great money.
Right,
It's free money.
so, it was, but at that time, it was like, okay, we will go to bond and then we will return what the money is there to the taxpayers who paid it in. And then, there was ARPA, maybe we'll need some matching funds, we didn't know, wouldn't it be prudent to hold on to it, and now here we are,
Yeah.
3 years later, and
Correct.
we've forgotten about it.
It's a great question, thank you for bringing it
But
up.
Ellen, what you're saying is it's already all been spent.
No,
you
no,
said-
Oh, no, I
reserve fund.
apologize, the
Okay.
bond
Okay.
Yeah,
proceeds
and the
have.
bonds, yeah,
Right.
the bridges are done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the only thought, and it's, isn't my decision, I know that we have the facilities study coming.
Yes,
And
yeah, that's where I was
so,
thinking too.
it also might be,
And
a
that's what you were
source
saying, we
for
need to talk to
what needs to come out
Yeah,
of
but
that.
maybe
But
that's,
to your point, Kari, we can't do anything with the funds that are in the bridge fund
Until we close it.
until we close it. I think if we simply closed it and didn't designate it for something else, it would be returned to the taxpayers and it would go to the undesignated fund balance. I would want to restrict it in some way, but I would like to recommend that it be restricted in some way, but.
Yeah. Okay, well, we need to first talk to Pete.
Yeah, and on that restriction, if we were to fund part of the HAB project, would that come out of the general building fund?
Yes,
Okay.
that would, from a purpose standpoint,
Yes.
that's the capital reserve fund it would
Yeah.
come out of.
Okay.
so we could potentially,
True.
so if we close the account, we could pay almost half of what we want to do for the half.
I mean, there's gotta be downside to closing that account too, though. I mean, some bridge is gonna fail somewhere.
We can open it again.
You can open it again. Okay, we need to look into that. Thank you, Kari. It's nothing I thought of. Anything else, board? Public?
This is public comment section of the.
It's not the public comment, it's only with, there is a public comment section coming up, sir. I know it's usually at the beginning of the meeting, but we're holding public hearings first. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm gonna propose a motion to, well, first we have to close the public hearing. So we're gonna close the public hearing, correct?
Enter.
No, close it. We were in it.
Did we enter? Did we do
Yeah.
a roll call?
No, you don't, I just call it.
Oh, okay.
I just open it.
Okay,
Chair's just open it.
okay, got it, okay.
So we're gonna close the public hearing, and we're gonna have a motion made to do what, Ellen? Support,
Approve and adopt.
approve and adopt the budget
As presented.
as presented?
And that's the budget, what we're really referring to is the Excel workbook with all the budget.
Yeah. Okay.
Includes contract costs.
Yes.
Yeah, so what is the budget? I mean, you haven't approved the contracts yet,
Go ahead.
so the amount of
The amount that is in the budget is appropriate to what we anticipate the contract costs being. Does that help? It is the maximum amount and also the accurate amount, as best as we can. I don't know if someone else wants to try and stab at that better.
That's what we have in there. It's
Yeah,
good.
I would just say, usually the school district would give you a budget number that is for the budget with the contract stripped out. So then you know what the, sort of carry forward the status quo, whatever. So that was the number I was looking for.
We didn't do that
We don't
last
have-
year with the
we
contracts, but we can certainly do a process like that going forward.
Yeah.
But
I think we have
don't-
often said that, like, if you go back and you read the motions of the select board at this time, we always say, we need to do a better job on the motions, instead of just saying what's presented, because if you're reading the minutes and you don't have the spreadsheet, and we've had so many spreadsheets.
I disagree with you there, Kari. I mean, the number's right there.
Try 1 year from now, seeing what you.
well, if I can offer the thought that if there's a request for a different and a new process,
Sure.
that maybe before
Yeah.
a year from now, so 9 months from now, and then we have time to do it.
We've always rolled the contracts in though, haven't we? That's what I recall.
Separate them out last year, I don't think. Did we?
Well, we didn't separate them out last year, but I don't know, I'm not saying that last year's process is one to be held up
What?
as an example, so.
We don't say.
No, we've always had them in there. But if we want to do it differently, that's great. We can talk about that over the ensuing months.
Well, could I suggest that we make sure that the total budget for FY25 be reflected in the minutes?
Sure. What's the number, Ellen?
The number that is resulting in a 6.55% tax increase is $35,606,803.32.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, I've made a motion to approve that. Is there a second? Anybody? We gonna let it die?
Second.
Thank you, Carrie. Any further discussion, comments?
I want to thank Ellen and Alex for working really hard, and the finance committee members who have worked really, really hard to get us to where we are. And maybe I should save this until after we vote in favor or not. I do like the idea of tacking on to these minutes the summary spreadsheet of the budget that does the highlights of the 35 million and 2 cents or whatever. I think that would be smart, so we have that information with our minutes, so in future generations or next year we can look at it. So
We have to go back over spreadsheet after spreadsheet.
yeah, so I would go forward with that.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Hearing none, I'm gonna call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Well, that was easy.
We have 2 more public hearings.
I know, that public hearing was closed. I'm just getting to my agenda. Which is over here. There it is. Carrie, I did this before, so I'm gonna open a public hearing for consideration and adoption of the collective bargaining agreements. So this is a public hearing to talk about those. The three, Alex, can you get us up to date on this? We're all, so the board has been apprised of all this and is up to date, but can you?
It's all a little crazy timing wise. Basically, we have a statutory deadline on April 9th. And what I think the board is intending to do tonight is to continue the public hearing that we've set tonight to a meeting on Friday at 11, this Friday, April 5th. At 11:30 a.m.
I assume in this room. 11:30, excuse me.
And that would be just for the purpose of the public hearing and the vote on the.
So we've opened the meeting. I've opened the meeting, the public hearing. Excuse me. We're going to continue the public hearing until Friday.
Yeah.
And why are we doing that? Can you just describe? The board knows, but if you could describe for the public better than I will.
Yeah, it's been a lot of last minute things, and we'd like to have all 3 of the contracts sort of a little more ready and buttoned up for the select board. And we have 2 contracts ready. We have 1 more that's not ready, so we'd like to just do them all at the same time.
Kari?
Yes.
I understand that the Finance Committee is going to want to comment on the collective bargaining agreements. So,
So what we already decided
okay.
is that we would probably just not take, say in our statement that we had not yet taken a position because negotiations were ongoing, and our plan then is that we have a regularly scheduled monthly meeting near the end of the month,
And
and
then
by
the town
then
meeting,
hopefully we would have all the information.
Okay.
We've requested a copy of the compensation study and some other things, and we can consider it then, and then we can include our position in letters to the editor and of course our
At the meeting.
comments at town meeting.
Thanks, Kari.
Excellent.
That's really helpful. All right. Any other comments from the public with respect to the collective bargaining agreements, which?
Greg Snyder, a member of the Finance Committee. I'm the vice chair. So I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
At the town meeting, there's going to be a separate warrant article
For each
of
the 3
collective bargaining agreements.
There'll be 3 warrant articles.
For each of them.
Yep.
And what we're saying now for the number of the budget.
Yep.
Is that the town is going to see within the warrant articles, those will total the same number that is in the budget that it is for the purpose of compensation of staff.
Yes.
Yeah, with just a caveat, which is that in the budget, there's not a distinction made between union and non-union staff in any budget lines. So if you're looking to make a one-to-one comparison from a warrant article to a budget account, there's probably not a way to do that. Because we have half of our staff are non-union.
But when you add up all the warrant articles, it will total this amount, yes.
Well, you'll want to have the town know what it's voting for.
Correct.
Because it's going to have a separate vote between the bargaining agreements and the budget.
Right.
So that will be made clear. And those and that compensation number that you all have just voted is going to be the same number that's in that warrant article? Are you confident about that number?
We're confident that the numbers in the budget accommodate the agreements,
The agreements plus the compensation for the non-union staff
correct?
equals the budget.
And will the tax rate still be the same as what you have in your memo?
Yes, we will, at this point, would not, I think without an additional vote, we will not be able to change the total.
You're sure about that?
appropriations.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Okay.
Thanks, Greg. Any other comments from public with respect to the collective bargaining agreements? Hearing none, and board, we're going to continue this until Friday at 11:30, I assume in this room, if it's, hopefully it'll be free. Great, thank you, everybody. So we're not closing that meeting, we're leaving it open, but I am going to open up another meeting, public hearing, keep calling them wrong. A public hearing to review and amend ordinance number 41, one of my favorite words, Parklets. Parklets. So this hearing is open, it's a public hearing, and I'm just getting to that portion of we saw the revisions. Part of it was, there was a bunch of typos, which I'm glad we corrected. I don't know how we let them through, but thank you for doing that. Anybody know where they are?
Yeah, so I move that we approve the proposed amendments to the Parklet ordinance. It's essentially making a number of typographical corrections, changing the application requiring the minor project committee approval versus a staff approval. I think that's the biggest change here, and that there is a modification to the map that for the viewing public, there was, so this was originally adopted, I want to say, during COVID.
Yeah.
So we could have outdoor seating, and it was a test, and we identified 5, maybe 6 areas to have outdoor seating. Never to exceed more than 4 parking spaces. Some of us have, hopefully all of us have dined on Main Street, either at Lou's or Murphy's, or had coffee out using the Parklet in front of Murphy's. The proposal is to change, there was, in the original concept, there was a Parklet over in front of Eastman's or Indigo, sorry, aging myself, wasn't that long ago. And so we're removing that one as there's limited interest at that location, and have added one, it looks like in front of the Works or the former Canoe Club. And so that is on our Parklet zone map. And those are the changes that are being proposed in summary.
Yeah, and I think there's really nothing very controversial.
Well,
You had a motion.
We need a second. Motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. But there may be public comment.
There might be public comment. Any public comment? Hearing none, board, I guess I can close the public hearing. Board, any comment on this?
I was just wondering why a cap at 16?
I don't know.
It's because if they're gonna be on Lebanon, or there are more spaces possible on Lebanon Street by like right side, am I reading that correctly?
But there's no,
But there,
we're not proposing any on Lebanon Street at this time.
I was wondering about so that's not in the ordinance. On the map, there's red
no,
splotches.
it's on South Street.
It's on South Street.
South Street, sorry.
It's on South Street.
Yeah, it just seems like if they're on South Street too, and they're gonna be on 3 places, that would leave it probably only to 1 place on South Street. I mean, yeah, I just question the number 16.
You want more parklets?
Yeah, I would like more parklets.
Parklets everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to do the parklets, I don't.
Well, I think we can,
I think
we can always revise it. I think this is just to address the need that we're faced with.
Right, we've had people request
Yeah.
this, and so we're modifying
Yeah.
the plan
meet
accordingly.
the
So if
request.
there's other people, you know, out there, the viewing public
All right.
are interested in more parklets.
Creating a parklet. Okay, any other discussion? Great, let's call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. I need my agenda. Good night, thank you,
Good night,
Finance
thank you for
Committee.
coming.
Finance Committee.
And it looks like we've finally gotten to public comment, and I'm sorry to keep you waiting there. Public comment is a portion of our, please come up, and while you're coming up, I'm just gonna describe how this works. It's a portion of our meeting where folks can address the select board on issues. We ask you to talk to issues that are not already on the agenda, and we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. If there are any questions, please address them to the chair.
Hello, my name is Chico Eastridge from White River Junction, Vermont. And I just came to ask why the Valley News is being denied access to an arrest report.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, there's an article yesterday, about Jim Kenyon requesting a police report about the arrests on Dartmouth property, about the trespassing case. And I'm not actually so concerned about the specifics of the case or that it's the Valley News, just that an arrest report is a pretty textbook public document, and I don't like it seeing documents like that being withheld and people having to go to court to get them. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. I don't have an answer for you. We'd have to talk to the chief of police with respect to that.
Okay. And it's really the town's attorney.
Yeah.
It's not the police chief's decision.
And that would be Laura?
There have been 3 attorneys involved in giving the town advice, all who have agreed with the town's position.
And what, may I ask what the town's position is?
I think you just stated it.
That it won't be, but why?
So I would have to, I'm not an attorney, and there are 2 matters before a court that this relates to, so I'm not going to speak to those specifically. I guess what I would say, although I'm happy to try and get a statement from our attorney, but the New Hampshire, the RSA 91A statute that that is the right to know law in New Hampshire puts the responsibility on the town to interpret and balance between 2 different things, which is the public's right to access certain government documents and public information, and also the town's requirement on the other end of a balancing test that we've been charged by the state to make on their laws to protect the privacy of individuals with information contained in records that the town may have. So anytime we get a right to know request, well, maybe not anytime, there's certain things that are a textbook, which this is not. But anytime the town gets a right to know request for something like that, those 2 things have to be balanced. Is the public's right to access the information and the town's legal requirement to protect the privacy of information contained within documents that might be in a right to know request.
Well, I mean, it sounds though that could be applied to any arrest warrant or arrest report.
Any document, yeah.
Yeah, but so at that point, yeah, and there are fairly well laid out exemptions within the Freedom of Information Act about
which is different, which applies to the federal government and federal records, but RSA 91A is the statute that applies to us.
All right, but yeah, I think it might be worth the town looking over your policies, putting on an agenda to review your policies about reviewing public documents. I just like to see public documents as readily available as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other public?
Hi, Bobby.
Hi, Bobby Hitchcock, part-time Hanover Town Clerk. So I have a 2-part question, I'll address to the chair, mostly for clarification purposes. And it's really to all the select board members. The query is about all the select board members. So outside of select board meetings, are select board members, do you accept inquiries and communications from the public? And not necessarily to answer questions or resolve things, but to be of voice, so that the public knows they have that you know, that the public has a voice with you.
So, Bobby, just to clarify, are you asking, because I'm sure we all frequently get this, there's two parts to this. One, certainly, listening, we all meet different people and we all have different walks of life, so we're meeting different people, and I think we're bringing in information from the public. I've already mentioned before several times about the childcare, and I've been overwhelmed by that. So I bring that in. On the other hand, in the state of New Hampshire, it's pretty clear that select board members need to be careful in how they represent themselves to the public. And what I mean by that is, in almost all instances, the select board member has to be representing, to the best of their ability, what they think the board is saying, has agreed to. And I can only think of one example where that's not the case.
Yeah, and I think, the second part of my question was, what is the protocol for access to you?
Just send us an email.
Okay,
Yeah.
where do we get your email address?
Oh, it should be on the...
I think it would be
There's a-
nice if
there's a
our
contact
individual emails would be on the website.
Yeah.
I think that, they're
on
not,
the-
no.
I think there's
that
is there a form?
A long
On
time
the
ago.
select board page, the only contact was the town manager's telephone number
Yeah.
that I could find.
So there's like two emails. There's
trying
a
to get there.
selectboard@hanovernh.org, which I think should be on there so that people know that's how to email everyone.
Okay.
So I think
But
that you're raising a really good point.
Yeah, and then
we should make
similarly,
that-
I think all of the individual emails should also be on there.
Yeah, the Hanover NH email. for
Yeah.
each of you. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so if they're not on there, just make sure we can put those on in the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that
No,
would
they
be
should,
wonderful.
I mean, and people who often stop you on the street, when I tell them, a lot of people, I have a number of email addresses, and people send me email all over, and it's like, no, this is the email for town stuff, it's not me.
I'm just
So
looking
it
at...
should be Hanover.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at, there used to be a form, was that on the old website? Where there was a form and we'd get these contact from people? I don't see that on the current one. Bobby,
So-
these are all good questions. Is there something specific that we need to be addressing?
With the lane closures.
Oh, yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback over that.
Yeah, okay.
Mostly my wife calling me up, yelling at me, but
Yeah. Well,
I didn't say that. Hey, Nick, can you erase the last 30 seconds?
Okay, so thank you. So I'll make sure that those get on the website.
Yeah.
Tracy.
No, that's great.
Nick, 30 seconds. Give me.
7 seconds.
All right, so we're closing that portion of the no announcements, public comment. So we're gonna move into business requiring discussion. And we're gonna talk briefly about what's coming up at town meeting. And the daytime election portion. Alex, do you wanna?
Yeah, there was just a couple things we kind of wanted to check in on, and part of the reason we asked Bobby, our town clerk, to be here tonight as well to speak to these things. So basically, we got some feedback last year at town meeting. There's a handful of different things we started kind of thinking about. Are there ways that we can improve this year's town meeting? I think there were some kind of parking and traffic related issues that we need to work on. Got a lot of complaints. The bleachers were not very comfortable. And so we're trying to think of some ways to, there's kind of two components, obviously, to the interior of the space in town meeting. There's the kind of 7 to 7 voting component, and then there's a business meeting component. As all of you know, I've also been doing some work trying to think of ways to get more people interested in coming to the business meeting. Obviously, we have a lot of people who vote during the day, but it'd be nice if the same exact number of people showed up at the business meeting, but that is of course not the case. So trying to think of ways to relay out the room. I didn't bring my dongle thing to plug my computer in, but I can run and grab it if we want to. We're looking at a couple different layout ideas for, let me zoom out a little bit. So we're looking at a few different pieces: parking, traffic, the space where the actual business meeting is held, and then there's some additional, conversations about, we've talked a little bit about a sort of open house type event that people can come to learn more about ahead of time. Just starting to figure something out there, and also some additional mailings and things to make sure everybody knows that we're having town meeting, and that they're allowed to be there as a registered voter in town. But the two main things that I think we just wanted to check in on, I don't know how the conversations went today, where you all were meeting and talking a little bit more about the voting portion of the meeting. We have a monthly meeting now with all of our kind of election-related staff that we put in place last year. So that's our town clerk, town moderator, supervisor of the checklist, our staff that work on elections and in the clerk's office, and myself and Carrie. I think that's the group. So it's a good group there. A couple weeks ago, we went over to Hanover High School to kind of look back at the space, also look at the auditorium space. We were sort of thinking about gym or auditorium. Is one of those spaces better? Although the auditorium is probably better from a room perspective, we were a little concerned about transportation between spaces and people getting into the building and the number of volunteers that might be needed. And so the seats are certainly more comfortable. I tested them out in the auditorium and the bleachers, but I think we all agreed that it would be kind of too much to change this year to do that, and that we're sort of focused back on the gym, but rearranging the space inside the gym a little bit. So basically there's two different layouts. One is very similar to last year as far as the stage being basically in the same place if you want to use that as an anchor point, but not using the bleachers anymore and using tables and chairs that would have cushions on the bottoms.
Why
Yes.
tables?
So the idea of the tables is sort of interesting, so as you all know, I've, talked to a couple dozen other towns about what they do at town meeting to try and create atmospheres of, positive sort of communal stuff and that sort of thing. And so what we sort of have is a dual layout where we have a bunch of chairs that people could sit in, but also a bunch of round tables with only chairs on half the side. And so the idea is that we could put some information on the table, put some like feedback forms on the table for people to fill out about how town meeting was, maybe put a pitcher of water on the table, and have neighbors in Hanover sitting with neighbors at a table together. You lose a little bit of space that way. We had some positive feedback from some folks that we've talked to about it. It doesn't make a sufficient use of the space, but so the idea is to do a little bit of a mix and see what people gravitate towards and ask people's feedback. Again, the goal of trying to create a little bit more of a communal feeling. So that's the idea of the tables, is try it for a year, at least for some portion of the total number of seats. And if nobody sits in them and people fill out the forms and say, please don't do tables again, then never see tables again. But who knows, maybe everybody will want to sit at the tables, and then maybe next year we do only tables.
Where are the tables coming from?
So all of what we're doing on the business meeting side, because we're not using the bleachers, which are in some ways easier than chairs and tables setting up, although it's a bit of a contraption, is to have Bloods Catering do the whole thing, so that we don't have to have staff do all the setup and breakdown. They'll come in the day before, set a whole bunch of things up so it won't disrupt the voting portion of the meeting from 7 to 7. So it would cost a few thousand dollars to do that for everything, but also it saves a whole bunch of staff time on a day that's like a pretty critical staff time day. And we also don't have all this stuff. So the kind of general idea was, let's not use the bleachers, and then if we don't use the bleachers, because those can only be done all or nothing, and there's 700 seats in those bleachers, and as much as I would love, if 700 people showed up, it doesn't seem like that's the direction we're probably going in. So tables, chairs, we have to have some physical demarcation between areas where people are voters and non-voters, right? So there's like an observation area. We have to have an area for CATV to be able to set up so they can put a camera that can go above people's heads. We have to have an area for the select board and for Ellen and I to sit. We need an AV projector and equipment, and obviously spaces for people to walk. This is all just on the business meeting side. So we have a layout that turns the whole room to the side, so that basically the stage area is in the corner where if you think about where the exit door is in the gym, like where we would walk out, it would be basically against that wall, and then so it's basically a more narrow kind of room, and then the other option is keeping it the same and having a wider room. Both of those options involve trying different seating and seeing if that makes any difference. What's also potentially included in the space on the business meeting side is a little bit of space for like our social service organizations or boards or committees where they could set up or put information or hand out information or have sign up forms. So if there's people coming in who need access to like some of our social services, that the town meeting would not just be a meeting, but would also be a place of information about things, other ways to get involved. Obviously everybody will be registered to vote if they're eligible by that point. But if a list of people who might want to volunteer on boards or committees, there's something while we've got so many people in the room to try and get them access to a little more information. And so those were also things that were pretty common in a lot of other towns that had like what you might call like really vibrant town meeting, where they had meals together or they had other organizations in the community participate in town meeting. And that was just some of the feedback last year that I know I got from a handful of folks in town too. So anyway, those are sort of the brainstorming. I don't know, Bobby, if there was anything you all touched on today that hits that side of the room.
We did, yeah. We
Okay.
had another meeting that Alex wasn't able to attend, so you and I need to get together as soon as possible. My big concern is the entrances and exits and the ADA compliance and enough space for all the voting equipment, because there's 5 pages of laws that we have to accommodate. So, yeah, so.
Yeah, and so both of these plans give the same or more space to the voting area, and I don't know if you all had kind of worked out a floor plan today for that, or if we still need to talk about that.
Well, I worked out a floor plan and there was,
So we need to do some more work, okay.
Yeah, so you need to see the floor plan because it affects what you want to do too. So,
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So are you thinking that, so in terms of the 7 p.m. meeting, having social service agencies and information or board members there, there have been meetings where, we had pie and lemonade, and we had like the Hanover Conservancy and the Bike Walk Committee and, different entities, like, if we want feedback on downtown, they had a poster display and they had someone manning it. Often that was from 7 to 7 because that was when people, would take time, come and vote and do that. And then, so it's interesting to think about people coming to be social during the 7 p.m. meeting. And we've asked for creative ideas. I think food is going to be key, and I don't know if that's in the blood. If Bloods is providing, blondies and cocoa, you might get an extra. Well, you'll get students, but
Sounds good.
I don't know. I think it's very interesting.
Do we know the number of people who typically go to the business portion of the meeting? I mean, roughly.
125.
There were 150 voters who signed in for the May 2023 one.
To get those little pieces of
150.
paper, in other
Yeah.
words.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that kind of typical?
Maybe a little low. I think we're shooting for, with chairs, 200 to 250.
Good.
Yeah.
No, never gonna get.
And so we're overshooting a little bit.
So what about the cafeteria, the Hanover High School cafeteria, which is a little closer to the gym?
It's really
No.
small.
Is it too small for
Yeah,
that?
way too small.
Okay.
Yeah,
The auditorium's a really nice space. The issue with it is that it's actually nice because it's got all the AV stuff already set up in there. The chairs are all set up. We don't have to rent anything. Nobody has to do all of that. We have to move some of the drums out of the way, though I personally thought that they would be really dramatic openings to town meeting to like get on the timpani back there behind the curtains, but that's certainly not my decision. The problem was at the entrance to the space, you either have to come in the normal entrance where you come in through the gym, and it's a good walk down the hallway, and there's not really gates that come down, so we would be responsible for keeping an eye on the hallway the whole time and making sure people aren't wandering off into other, like you couldn't lock the hallway down that well. And then there's an outside entrance that I think does come into the cafeteria, but it's not well lit. There's like actually no lights out there for a portion of that path, and it's a little bumpy, and there's like some cracks in the sidewalk. Not that we should be talking, but we just didn't. Yeah, right. So we just felt like we didn't. Although you could do the auditorium from the bottom entrance too. We looked at
From the
Right,
front
but
door.
in order to get up into all
There's
those
stairs
chairs,
in
there's
right.
stairs.
Oh, but that's what I mean. You can. So the ADA portion would be by entering the. We would bring people down to the bottom entrance in the auditorium, but the entrance to the school, there's not really lights. It's bumpy. It's not. We didn't think that was a great place to send people, especially if it's the first year at night, and we didn't feel comfortable blocking off the hallway. So I think we sort of landed back on the gym and sprucing it up a little bit.
So how are we entering, during 7 in the morning to 7 at night, you enter from the back of the school now? Is that how you're entering for town meeting, for the 7 PM portion?
What I propose is people coming in that long side hallway again, and I believe that we're allowed to use that main hallway that late at night, the one that's closed off to us now, and having them come into the main hallway and into that first gym door where they used to come in. That's my hope, that we can do that, because you need to have 3 separate lines for different categories of voters.
For the 7 PM?
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking of the lighting, as you said, lighting in the back of the school is pretty dark.
I will probably be getting a portable light. It'll be light when people come into, up until when people, the only time that it'll be dark will be when people are leaving at the end of the meeting. I'm probably gonna get like a portable light or two from either fire or public works, or just go buy something at Home Depot. It's not gonna like be the prettiest light in the world, but at least something that just shines right over there and doesn't blind the neighbors.
School might have something we can borrow that they use for sporting events too.
Oh, that's not if we have like those sort of, that's interesting. Something a little less industrial looking.
Correct.
That could be nice, maybe some like tiki torches down the pathway. No?
And just as somebody who organizes the volunteers, my objection pointed out to me by Carrie and Tracy was that if they moved the business meeting to the auditorium, there'd be a whole slew of volunteers who couldn't attend.
Right. That was complicated.
Yeah,
we
I'm
have
not
a lot
willing
of
to ask
voters,
them to do that.
Bobby, who vote between 6:30 and 7. I mean, they say, I'm gonna go vote, and then I'm gonna go right and sit in the bleachers kind of thing.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's not viable.
It's a shame, the auditorium is so nice, but great.
Cushions.
Well, thank
But
you.
cushion chairs,
Thank
we're
you,
trying
Bobby.
to create some, people feeling good about sitting with each other, and, put a copy of the town report on every table, put a pitcher of water, maybe some snacks, like just something that just, a little bit of that. We'll see what people think.
Can I ask my fellow select board members how they feel about the $2,000, $3,000?
Alex, I think it'd be helpful if you did go get, so you
To
can
put
see-
up the thing
Yes.
you guys wanna see,
I
okay.
think,
I also have to go to the restroom, so I'm gonna do both.
Why don't we take a 2-minute break?
Alex, I can get my computer, which is closer.
Do you have the,
I have both.
thing? Okay, sure.
That doesn't
And then you
allow us
probably don't need it, but I still need to use the restroom,
Yeah,
actually.
I do too.
We're gonna take a break. Nick?
Okay.
Okay, can I
Okay.
just speak one more
yeah.
time?
Please.
You can speak as often as you want.
There were some pretty severe traffic issues at the president's primary, and the police department got involved. So I asked Lieutenant Scabola and Chris Swain, who is in charge of the parking department, to attend our meeting today. And they've written up, they were great, they've written up a plan for potential traffic flow, especially next fall for the general election.
It's gonna be
presidential
bad.
election. I mean, we'd have maybe 1,200 voters for a town meeting. We're likely to have 8,000 for the presidential. That's a huge, so these elections are not good benchmarks in terms of traffic flow.
Right.
So they were all over that. They wrote little cute little maps, and I wanted the select board to know that they were very happy to help and appreciative of being asked.
That's awesome, thank you, Bobby.
I just wanted
Thanks
to
for
add,
doing
I'm sure you got this too with like the ADA stuff, but I always get people saying like, I didn't know where to go, I was walking, all the signs are for the cars.
Okay, so
And
more
I hear
walking
that-
signs?
Yeah, there's somehow the direction that people are coming. Sometimes they were talking to other people, so I didn't get the direction. I know like if you're walking, well, at least one of them was coming down Lebanon Street, like from the church. And they didn't know where to go, so they ended up walking all the way around the school. Like, they followed the parking signs and then they were annoyed because they
Okay.
could have turned right and then,
So you,
they didn't know where to go.
so you're,
and-
okay.
They're not getting intercepted when they're walking. I didn't go and check, I was,
Jenny, is part of the
Yeah.
feedback there that when we put the directions out to make sure that we, like, if you're arriving by foot, by car,
Yeah.
like, to make sure we do kind of do that?
Yeah.
yeah, that directions, and then on the ground, like the day of, the wayfinding has to also be for pedestrians.
Sorry, the what?
Wayfinding should be,
The signs.
the signs, sorry,
Okay.
should be
more
for
signs.
pedestrians.
Yeah, for pedestrians.
Yeah, like on the sidewalk, because I think what happened was they were viewable from the street and not from there, and then they took you around the
Back of the school.
the back, yeah.
Okay, so we need more in front of the high school.
Yeah, in front, yeah, because even if they're coming from, like the direction of Lebanon, you probably don't want them walking down the driveway.
Right.
You'd probably want them walking down the sidewalk.
Right.
And people aren't getting, and this has been a couple years, I was trying to give it, but.
Okay, that's good to know.
More signage. Thank you. Alex, what you got there?
So this is the sort of vertical or the narrow room layout idea. We've gone through a few iterations of this, it's not final.
Can you orient us, please?
Yes. So, thank you, Tracy.
You're very welcome.
So this is where you would vote normally.
Yes.
And then you'd come out here to leave.
Yes.
So the bleachers would be along this wall normally and would get pulled out this way.
Right,
That helps
okay.
kind of orient us. And so the idea is we have some tables down here for various things, potentially. I mean, it's interesting the idea about doing it during the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. as well. Where you have an even greater number of volume of people coming through. But some space to do things like that if we want to. Then we have our riser for CATV jam, and we have our observer area that is separated out from the rest of the voters. Then this is sort of the main voting area, but there's only 120 seats approximately. And so we have a whole sort of additional row of like more overflow. I think the idea, you check people in here and then kind of shuttle people down and sort of just see. I mean, you can see how much bigger the 60 seats in the tables takes up.
Yes.
But also it's because we've only got a few chairs per table because we don't want, so if we really wanted to, we could also have some extra chairs, right? So that if we had hundreds and hundreds of people show up that we weren't expecting, you could always throw more, you could fit plenty more chairs in here. They just wouldn't be sitting at the table. So we'll certainly have some extras in case, but that's the general idea. And this doesn't show any of the voting side because of course, Blood is not involved in any of that. But this is what we're sort of thinking.
And where are your select?
So that's all up here.
Okay.
So this is the podium for the moderator, and I think Select Board and Ellen and I were up with you last year. And then this is the projector screen here, which is actually almost the same location it was last year. We were just facing the other direction.
Right.
So we could do that also, but we're just trying to play with a few different things here without doing too much change in one year. But just see, is this orientation a little bit better? Do people like the tables? Is this useful at all? Like, just, we have a handful of questions like that. It's a few $1,000s to rent everything. We definitely have it in the budget, like as far as our YTDs on a whole bunch of different accounts. Yeah, so that's what we're sort of thinking about as far as the layout is concerned. And then I have a few other short updates about the meeting.
So the tables look like they would encourage discussion, which it's just a question mark whether we want that or not. I mean, I'm going to be sitting there. I guess I'll be sitting up there.
Yeah,
but if I were at one of those tables, I'd be, chatting with people. That's what people do. So does that distract or enhance?
Great question, to which I don't have a solid answer.
Okay.
I think I could see it going either way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I mean,
What's the visibility of the
interesting.
Oh,
screen, like we're talking the length of the gym now rather than the width of the
so
gym?
and that's my concern about this. So two answers to that, Jenny. One is, this is up on, these are up a couple, like about a foot or two off the ground. So this is all ground level, and this would be up just a little bit so people could see everybody from the chairs. That is my concern with this layout versus the other layout, is that can you actually really see stuff if you're sitting back here? I think we'll be able to hear it because we'll have microphones and speakers and stuff, because we need that anyway. But my concern is, like, are people going to feel like they're in the nosebleed section back here? And then if that's the case, I want to go back to the gym and eyeball that a little bit. And then if that's the case, then I think the idea would be basically do this, but we just turn it back the way it was. So you have a wider meeting, which I think if you were to measure bird's eye, from podium to chair, the wide meeting is probably a lower average distance between each podium and each chair. So I'm a little concerned that back here might be a little too far, but I want to just go back to the gym and look at it.
And you have chairs even beyond that.
That's true, right? These are the real nosebleeds.
What are those chairs?
This is the observer section.
Oh,
The non-resident.
The non-residents, yeah.
Can't see any, okay.
So that's on the basketball court, is that like is the observer section at the key, or where is it? Like on the basketball court, because there's like markings on the gym, right?
That I don't know.
Okay.
But it's pretty far. I mean, this is the other wall, so.
They're
and
pretty far back.
This is relatively to scale.
And you're proposing AV. Can you just walk us through that?
Yeah, it'll be the same as last year. We'll have a projector screen. We'll have microphones on the tables, podium, probably a microphone up at the front of these chairs, and probably one or two here as well for the public to use when they come make comments. CATV jam set up back here. That's the same as last year. There's only one, as far as I'm aware, there's only one camera angle, I think. So it's not like we have multiple angles for when people are speaking, but everybody would have a microphone, and there'd be some speakers, I would think, kind of like here, and here, something along, or I don't know if he uses the ones in the auditorium. I don't remember.
I think so.
You think so? Like went into their system? Yeah. So then you've got speakers in the ceiling. So I think the audio is actually going to be fine everywhere. I just worry, and the whole idea is for people to feel more communal. Like, we're just trying to figure out ways to do that. And if you've got people sitting way out where they can't even see someone, then it doesn't really accomplish that.
If you were to flip it,
Yep.
like you said, we hear people, and I've sat in those bleachers, they're really uncomfortable. So I like the idea of having soft seating. But the numbers, if like last year was kind of a light year, 150 people, and this is set up for 150.
This is 180 here,
Okay.
which I think is a little low.
And you also have all of your department heads out.
Yep, and so, yeah, they would be planned to all be, and we could, you could probably add another row of seats up here, but we would do that similarly. We would probably have all the department heads up front.
Right.
So I don't know if we gain a lot of seating by turning it, but the goal is to get north of 200 and then have the extra chairs.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think what you're saying, if you want to be a community and you're back in the 25-yard line and they're at the goal line, I think you might be too far away, but we've been in cars before, and
Yeah, I was just thinking that. We had 2 successful meetings.
outdoors.
Okay,
So as long as you all are, we just wanted to make sure to sort of check in, because these are obviously some changes. And so, you know, this is the latest, this was just, and I haven't even looked at this yet today, but I think this is the latest one from Bloods that we got back from the, right? Yeah, okay. So we may try turning this, may try to get this 60, may try to get that over 200 just for safety's kind of sake, and then have a stack of chairs somewhere if we need them. But we're gonna try this as well, because I think like all of you, I'm a little worried about the back here, just being outside of it. So that's good timing.
All right, perfect timing. Thank you.
And then just if I can do one or two other updates about town meeting. So you know, we're thinking about a couple other things to try and get some interest publicly. One of the ideas is to send a postcard to every postal customer in town. So that's not something at least since, well, I've only been here for one town meeting, that we've done, which is like the every door direct mail program at the postal service, where you just get a postcard out and you just drop one to every household or every postal customer. And that would be pretty short, brief, because it's only gonna be a postcard, but basically like a QR code, a link, a little bit of information, reminding people that if you're a registered voter in town, or really if you're an eligible voter, not a registered voter, if you're an eligible voter, you are, well, let me finish the sentence. If you're a registered voter, you are a member of the town's legislative body. If you're an eligible voter, you're eligible to be a member of the town's legislative body. I think that's the right way. Anyway, just reminding people that this is, you know, I don't think everybody even knows that this is something that they have the kind of right and responsibility to do.
Yep.
So like a short postcard that directs people to more information. And then we've also been talking to some, like the Dartmouth Civics Club and a couple other organizations about, they are planning on probably doing, they did one last year, a candidate forum, and to have an event that does like a town meeting 101, and at that event to have some staff and boards there as well to sort of like answer people's questions about warrant articles or town meeting, or like, hi, you know, I'm a student or I'm a resident and I'm really interested in transportation issues. Where is that in the budget? Where is that in the warrant articles? And of course, it's kind of complicated, as we all know. Like, it's not so easy to draw some of those connections, but there's actually a lot of stuff in there about those things. So the idea is helping connect people to what they're interested in, to what's actually in the budget and what's a town meeting. This would be open to all members of the community. And this is different than, I know there's a sort of mock town meeting that I don't know if Nico's organizing, some other folks are organizing it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's organized. They were trying to find a date.
Okay, so I know there's that event too, and this is, I think it's slightly different. But so the idea is that we'd have, you know, some boards and committees for a couple hours, you know, one evening, a week or two before town meeting, you know, just helping give more information about what's out there, and trying to encourage people to come to town meeting. So those are the only other things other than sort of standard stuff of, I'm sure, I think Athos and I have talked about recording, when the warrant is complete, a podcast episode where we'll walk through everything for everybody in the public. If there's any other things people are thinking about, I've got a couple. I'd rather not share them quite yet because I don't have buy-in. I'm trying to do, maybe, you'll all have it in 2 weeks anyway, like 1 or 2 fun warrant articles. Because we actually don't have a ton this year. I'm not trying to create more, but just something that's like a little.
You're gonna lose some of your staff, Alex.
Yeah,
so, like ramp it down a little.
Yeah,
just bring it down a notch.
Okay? I think the 1 or 2 minutes per warrant article for a little, you know, levity in the meeting is, but so we're trying to, you know, a few things like that, and obviously all of this is talked through with Jeremy, our moderator, and all the election staff, and make sure everybody's on board with everything. But I just wanted to make sure to update you all on the idea of the open house type thing that we've talked about a bit, and that we're going to try and push out a little more information in addition to the town report, which is the postcard, so that everybody at least sees the postcard, hopefully.
So the one thing about the postcard is we did it for the master plan and sustainable master planning thing. We did a couple of postcards, and we wanted to make sure we engaged with the students. And so we actually did their hymn box. And we learned that that was just a really dumb idea. because
they're not-
they just threw them away. They're
Okay.
just all on the ground. And everyone said, don't waste the paper,
Right.
do blitz or, do email blitz.
Blitz and like on tables in.
Yeah, some tabling or something like that.
So it sounds like the
No
feedback is
back
not
in
to
the
use the
college.
mail to try and reach students.
For students,
Right,
because
right.
they don't go, it's just kind of a
But the
waste.
postcards aren't a bad idea to reach students, just in a different,
Not in their mailbox.
location.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about, I know we've got a couple student groups who wanna help with this too, so.
So they do, students do read, in the dining hall, they have like table tents
Yeah,
with information on it, but you actually have to,
you have to go through
there's a process through the dining hall,
yeah.
so,
The table tents, I think, are popular.
because they're just, you're sitting there just
Anything
looking at
else,
stuff. Has Jeremy seen this proposal, the floor plans? Not yet.
Probably, I don't know, I mean, he wasn't at the meeting last week, but he's on all the emails and I've talked to him a bunch of times independently. So he's pretty up to speed, but he can't always make the meetings during the day.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having other information available, but I'm not sure, often people are coming in at 7, so our election officials have already worked 12, 15, 16-hour day. And so, encouraging the chit chat at 7, maybe I think you want it to be welcoming, but I'm not sure people are gonna talk about bike walk. I mean, you want to start your meeting at 7, so it might be better to have tables during the day. I don't know what the answer is.
It's an interesting idea, and I think our expectation is not that people are gonna spend a ton of time doing that, but maybe they're 5 or 10 minutes early, maybe we start 5 minutes late, and that's about it.
Great, thank you. Let's move on. We're going to business requiring action. And there's a consent agenda. The first item on the consent agenda is approved classification of new accounting and HR analyst position. The second is we have a slew of minutes because we tabled them from last time. The third is approval of, we have one elderly exemption, which we got outside of our packet. And that looked straightforward. And appointments to Hanover Bike Walk and tax collector. And two banner requests, one for the Upper Valley Walk to End Alzheimer's and one from the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Upper Valley, and that is supporting the Upper Valley Haven, correct? Yes. Any issues? Does anybody want to pull out the minutes, which is usually what we do sometimes? I'm fine with them.
They were good.
Good with minutes. I just had one question about the job description. My understanding is this is reporting to the finance and admin department, right? And
Correct.
so it's an accountant that will report directly to you?
Correct.
That wasn't clear in the job description, and I didn't know if it should be a little more clear, just in terms of, and maybe it's because I don't really understand the org chart, but at one point I thought, oh, is this administrative services or is this finance? And I'm like, it should be finance, right?
It is, and sort of my title goes back and forth too, but yes. And I think the HR component is, in particular, if you think about either the budget and a lot of the analysis, I've spent a ton of time on the comp work.
Yep.
But then also sort of technical knowledge on the sort of analyzing costs of benefits, and then, but really having the accounting skills. So yes, it's sort of the core functionality and the really important work accounting oriented, but it will bridge over to some of the HR functions that have the accounting component to them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Okay, so it sounds like we're keeping the whole consent agenda.
For the minutes, I guess the only thing is when we post them, will the changes be accepted so that, yeah, okay, that's cool. Just so they're not all different colors.
As long as everybody accepts what you
Yeah.
sent, then that's what I'll make the changes.
Yeah.
And
That's what I thought you did, I just didn't know. It's lots of colors.
Say yes.
Yeah.
Move to approve items 1 to 5 by consent.
Awesome. We've never done this before.
So
I'll
excited.
second that.
This is so exciting. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Whoa, we did that for the first time ever. Town manager report.
Nothing.
Select board reports, Joanna.
The trustees of trust funds met last week, Friday maybe? I don't know when it was.
The week before that, I think.
Yeah, it was
Oh, right, because we were going to meet last Thursday.
Thursday,
So it was the
so
Friday
it was
before,
2
yeah.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
Or whenever. And we spent a lot of time reviewing language for guidance language for the percent funds. And the task before us now is to put together an application form that we have on hand for that is straightforward for town department heads, people in the community who want to see new programs that benefit the Hanover community. It'll be a simple, straightforward form. And once that's done, we'll have a process in place. And and actually the strategy or the guidelines that the trustee of trust funds came up with, I think are really good because they will transfer knowledge to the new members of the trustee of trust funds, because Jay Pearson his term is up and he was stepping down. So there'll be a vote in May. And it is very explicit about the trustees coming. We make time in our agenda as a select board to know the status of our funds, what's available, what's happening in terms of percent funds and Bridgman funds, which are particular funds. Bridgman is for school district, but it's important for us to understand how the trustees are managing our trust funds. So I don't know, Ellen, am I forgetting anything?
No, I just think that we've had really good conversation and your participation, Joanna, I think is really important. And I was thrilled to hear the conversation tonight, very knowledgeable about the transactions and so.
But I think the trustees have done a really good job at making sure it's clear and the information will go to the next group, and they can, it's not cast in stone, but it's we think we've come up with a good best management practices, not only for the funds, but in terms of, percent's allowed you to spend 5%. They're like, well, that's just not sustainable for intergenerational stuff. We should look at 4% and we should be doing averages. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm good with that. But we did talk about process and the importance of that. They do a really important job, and we need to stay in communication with them and stay on top of what we can and can't do with those monies. And it isn't as black and white as you think it could be. So.
Thank you, Joanna.
Quick question, do you continue to be confident that they are in their lane?
Yes.
I have always been suspicious of that.
No, I think that they are taking their job very seriously, and that they are compelled by law to manage these trust funds in accordance with what the agreement, the bequest is how it's stated, and they've gone for clarity, and it is fully within the select board's decision-making power to say, this is a good project, this isn't a good project. We now have clarity that we can't use funds to build stuff. That's not what, in terms of the percent funds, that's not what the money was. That's not what the percent family wanted to happen. They wanted funds to be used to do programs that your tax dollars aren't normally funding. And I think the classic example was before COVID, the library came to us with a proposal to create a makerspace, not eligible, but to staff the makerspace and to offer program to the broader community. That was a perfect example of what a program is. And so we just have to keep that in mind as select board. And so they're not telling us what can and can't be done. That's our job.
Thanks, Joanna. There was a meeting of the Conservation Commission back in mid-March, and much of it was taken, they're always interesting and I always learn a lot. This one, much of it was taken up with they're in the process of developing a management plan for the Hanover Town Forest, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's off Goose Pond Road, obviously on the Hanover side of Goose Pond Road, and there's a lot of interesting topographical and ecological features to it. I learned a lot.
Magical space, magical place.
Nancy.
How Board had a meeting the day before the gigantic snowstorm. And we were planning to have a house soiree the next day, and people would come in their taffetas and patent leathers and walk through 12 inches of snow. In our infinite wisdom, we decided, nope, we paid the caterer their, and encouraged them to give food away to whomever they give food away, and we assume that that happens. However, we have decided that there shall be no snow, despite the fact that Wednesday and Thursday we are having even more snow. We have decided that April 20th, we can actually, with a clear conscience, go ahead with a soiree raising funds for the library. So once again, if you had a ticket, you can use it again April 20th. We were offering refunds, or you can just give your tickets value to the HOW as a donation. So fingers crossed, April 20th, the sun will
I don't know
shine.
about you, but I had 24 inches at my house with that storm.
Well, sorry about that. Fortunately we didn't have the soiree at Johanna's house. That's it for my report.
So the Finance Committee, as you heard, met on March 28th, last Thursday, and we'll meet again tomorrow. I think all the topics relative to the budget were pretty much aired today. So the one school board member report is that there's a potential legislative initiative that would rejigger the way New Hampshire education taxes are raised, and it could have an adverse effect on Hanover, estimated to be perhaps $1.5 million, which is significant.
That's a lot of money.
But that is not yet legislation, but that is pending, and it seems like there's a fair chance it goes through.
This is because of the success of Vermont doing that, and New Hampshire wants to.
No comment. Yes, that's it.
Interesting.
Okay, the planning board's meeting tomorrow, and we'll have a plan for the master plan. So if you are been following along with that, could be a big day tomorrow.
Is it the final public hearing for the master plan?
It's like agenda as they have a public hearing, so they could adopt it, or if there's further comments, they said they'll have a schedule for when to adopt it. So it could be tomorrow. So that could be a fun day. Hanover Bike Walk had their meeting today, and I guess last month, but and we swore in with Bobby here. For the first time, some people who have served for 4 decades, the first time they actually got officially sworn in. So we had a quorum to have a little swearing in party with Bobby. And then we walked over to our meeting. It was really fun. Thank you very much. And we're going to, the 20th is a big day. I think it's Green Up Day too.
It is.
Green Up Day, our spring spectacular, and the new hire at Parks and Rec reached out to Hanover Bike Walk and is hoping that, as we were given warning, hoping we could do the bike ballet and also coordinate with Dartmouth Bikes to do a pop-up fix-it clinic, so people could ride there, drop off their bike, get it fixed and ready for spring while they go to the spring spectacular. So that looks like it's in the works. We have several people who have expressed interest making sure that will happen. And so we're planning to be there 11 a.m. till 2 p.m., which is the chunk of the family part of the programming. And I think
What is the Spring Spectacular?
it is an Allen Street event that is coming up in association with Earth Day. And there will
Thanks.
be lambs. That is the part that I forgot. That is probably the biggest draw. In addition to some other like planting, seed planting. They have Parks and Recs has a bunch of fun activities planned. But I don't think you can beat the lambs.
Live lambs, not on spit.
No,
Right.
real live lambs, like baby lambs. I don't know what they're serving at Sawtooth that day. But, cause they're planning to do lunch
Oh,
outside.
it is 10. I was gonna be like, what's going on here?
10 o'clock.
Yeah, it's late.
Got it, Jenny?
Yeah,
Great, thank you. There has been a request to move to non-public session to discuss items pursuant to RSA 91:1:3 to A, B, D, E, L.
Whitcomb, yes.
Rossi's yes.
Carter, yes.
Callahan, yes.
Chamberlain, yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, we're not, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Bye, Tracy.
Bye,
Bye, Bobby.
Tracy.
Bye,
Bye,
Carrie.
Carrie.
Oh,
No,
did everyone sign?
Yes, did you sign?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie.
Can I give you this too? Thanks.
There we go.
Thank you for your.